The Unexplained Rundown is pleased to partner with tpublic.com and bring you some fun and fantastical apparel and accessories that are truly out of this world. If you're keen to support the show and see it grow, be sure to check out some of the cool designs in the merch store and grab yourself a bargain. Use the link in the description below.
Concern you about the unknown and the unidentified flying object?
Oh, yes, we discussed it at every conference that we had with the military, and they never were able to make me a concrete report on.
Do you have anything on the subject, sir?
No, I haven't anything on the subject, and there's always things like that going on. The flying saucers, and we've had other things, you know.
For years, the world has seen reality distorted, facts manipulated, and truth hidden. But there's even more to the story than anyone has ever suspected, because no one has been able to see the whole picture until now.
Friends, welcome back to another episode of the Unexplained Rundown, and Happy New Year. It's good to be with you. Thanks for taking some time out of your morning, your day, your evening, or your graveyard shift, wherever you are around the world. If you're new to the channel, if you found it intentionally, then like me, you're intrigued by the unexplained mysteries of this mortal coil of ours, and you crave to know what's real and what's not. We've got a couple of people in the chat already, so just want to say hi to some regulars. Jimmy, always good to see you, my friend. Thank you for taking time out of your Melbourne day to join me. We have Fragfart also in the room. Welcome. I believe this may be your first time joining. If so, thanks for being with me today. Everett, thank you. Morning, guys. Jeff Bauer is here. Good to see you, Jeff. Thanks for joining. And Mark is in the room as well. Thank you, Mark, for taking some time out of your day to join. Folks, just want to say a couple of words at the front end. Thank you to the Patreon members for the Unexplained Rundown, Jimmy Sychowski, Jasmine Schrock, and Clint Feidler. Really appreciate your support, guys. If you are interested in supporting the Unexplained Rundown, you want to see the channel grow, have a look at the links in the description below. You can become a member for a couple of gold coins a month on Patreon, or if you want to join membership on YouTube, feel free. Otherwise, consider giving it one of these. Like, share, subscribe. Let your family, friends, social network know if this is content that's of value and interest to you, and you think it may be to your friends. Feel free to pay it forward. So, man, what a frenetic and huge start to the new year. And let's just completely ignore the Miami aliens saga and debacle at the start of the year. We're not going to cover off on that in today's episode. I mean, I think sadly that just shows you that unfortunately there are many out there on TikTok and social media that are keen to seek profit or secure clicks and likes. They want to seek profit by pushing information that they know is demonstrably false and BS. So we're not going to go into the Miami aliens today, but we do have a pretty jam-packed show. So let's get it started, and we'll start with what we usually do on the Unexplained Rundown, the rundown. So I'm going to give you a kind of run through what's been happening, close to home on the UAP UFO topic for the start of 2024, and also kind of give you a breakdown of some of the things that have been happening around the globe that you may find of interest. So close to home, we know that a couple of months back now, the Australian Minister for Defence, Richard Marles, responded to the petition that I submitted to the House of Representatives back in, I believe it was June of last year, requesting that a formal review be conducted by the House of Representatives and essentially the Australian government, complete a formal review of its current position on UAP, because it really hasn't had hasn't done anything on the topic since 1996, and consider implementing an investigatory body to assess the potential national security threats and safety of flight risks that UAP pose in an Australian context. So just to kind of recap, if you're not familiar with the response letter that I received from the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister for Defence, Richard Marles, I'll just show you on screen. Here we go. We'll just bring up that document if I can find it. Give me 1 second here, folks. Where is it? Not that one. So this will just kind of give you a sense as to what was included in the response letter from the Minister of Defence. Now, hopefully that's pretty sizable on screen. So I'm not going to read through the whole letter. I'll just run through a couple of points. Obviously, this was a response letter from the Minister for Defence, Richard Marles, to the chair of the House of Representatives, the Committee on Petitions. And basically, the Minister of Defence acknowledges in the letter, so it says, as acknowledged in the petition, Defence ceased handling reports of UAP in 1996 as there was no scientific or compelling reason to continue to devote resources to the recording and investigation of UAP. Defence does maintain robust safety and security reporting and management frameworks that are sufficiently flexible to capture UAP. We'll talk about that as we go through. The Australian government is aware of the establishment of the United States All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, AARO, and Defence monitors AARO reports. There are no plans to replicate a similar mechanism. So that was the response that came back from the Minister for Defence. So what is interesting, if I pull this back up for us, come back to our slide there. So I submitted an email to the Defence media team, as well as the Deputy Prime Minister media team, on the 4th of December of last year, essentially, highlighting that, well, in that response letter that you provided me to the UAP petition, Minister for Defence, Richard Marles, you indicated that Defence monitors AARO reports. So I want to know, well, which department or group within the Department of Defence monitors those reports? So I submitted a question basically saying, as the topic of UAP is of significant public interest, on consideration of the above statement, which was in the petition response that Defence monitors AARO reports, could you kindly provide clarification by way of response to the following question? Which Australian Defence Force service or services or Australian Department of Defence group or groups are responsible for monitoring AARO reports? Now, I've submitted probably 4 follow-up emails from the 4th of December. Do you think I've received a response to date? None and Buckley's. So no cigar there. I sent a separate email on the 21st of December to, again, this is the Defence media team, really just wanting to ping them on what we now know. The Australian Department of Defence did a complete backflip on its July 2023 admission that Australia did not attend a United States briefing on UAPs, namely the Five Eyes Forum on UAP. And then in December, only last year, it did that 180 backflip and said, well, yes, a defence representative of the Australian Embassy in Washington actually did attend the Five Eyes Forum on UAP. So I submitted an inquiry to the Defence media team on the 21st of December, asking, on consideration of the above contradicting statements that Australia did not attend a United States briefing on UAPs, and then the backflip that, yes, a defence representative of the Australian Embassy in Washington attended, the question I asked was, could you kindly provide comment on the discrepancy and confirm why the Australian Department of Defence did not provide a factually accurate response to Senator Wish Wilson's question on notice number 91 back in July? Now, do you think I've received a response to that inquiry and the 3 or 4 follow-up emails that I've sent as well? Yep, none. You'd be absolutely right. A separate email that I sent only last month on the 12th of January, a little bit hard to see on the screen, but I thought I would reach out to the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Defence, Richard Marles, directly, because I had received no response to my inquiries from Defence Media and the Deputy Prime Minister Media's team. So I asked the Minister of Defence, Richard Marles, a couple of questions. Question was, and this is kind of building off the response that he provided to the House of Representatives following that petition that I submitted back in June. My questions specifically were, following your response to the House of Representatives petition EN 5115 regarding unidentified anomalous phenomena, UAP, could you kindly provide clarification and comment by way of response to the following questions? What does Defence consider constitutes a scientific or compelling reason to divert resources to the recording and investigation of UAP? Now, remember, we don't live in 1996, we live in 2024. And I would say that our brothers and sisters across the pond, the United States, has found an incredibly compelling reason to divert its resources of the United States Department of Defense to the investigation of UAP. We know that Congress legislated the implementation of AARO, and it is now fully funded and almost reaching full operational capacity. So if our US ally and Five Eyes partner has identified a very compelling and scientific reason to investigate UAP and spend some dollars on it, well, why hasn't Australia? What do you consider constitutes that scientific reason or compelling reason? Question number 2, what department or organization within Defence monitors AARO reports? Building on the question that I submitted to the Defence Media team and Deputy Prime Minister Media team back in December. Question should be question 3, but I don't know why I've numbered it as 4. In your official capacity as Deputy Prime Minister / Minister for Defence, have you received a briefing on UAP to date? Because that's never been made clear. The Royal Australian Air Force has told us, me, by way of response letters time and time again, that it has not briefed the Minister of Defence, Richard Marles, on UAP. So, and we know, Richard Marles, that you have met with the United States Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, now 6 times in less than 2 years. Have you been briefed in any capacity on UAP by the United States? Have you been briefed at all in any capacity by the Australian Department of Defence and the Australian Intelligence Services on UAP? The final question was, on consideration of the above contradicting statements, again, this is back to that Australia did not attend a United States briefing on UAPs. Department of Defense admitted that in July, then backflipped in December. Oh no, a defense representative at the Australian Embassy in Washington attended. So asking the Minister for Defense directly, on consideration of those above contradicting statements, could you kindly provide comment on this discrepancy and provide why the Australian Department of Defense did not provide a factually accurate response to Senator Whish-Wilson's question on notice number 91 back in July 2023? Again, do you think I've received a response to that inquiry? No, I haven't. So you'd be right. But I'm following up on that one to see what we can reveal. So that's just kind of giving you an update, a lay of the land on my efforts to try and get a bit more clarity from the Australian Department of Defence on its prior statements and who in Defence monitors AARO reports. So let's use that as now a segue. We'll move away from some of the news close to home, and we'll talk about what came out at the start of the year. TMZ released its 3-part series, UFO Revolution, which I believe you can watch on Tubi. It's not readily accessible on Tubi in Australia, but if you have a VPN, I believe you can watch it. I found it to be incredibly informative for folks that aren't maybe as well versed as us on the topic, and you'll want to kind of get a bit of a high level introduction to the UAP phenomenon. I think it was well presented. Obviously, it was very much focused on Jeremy Corbell and his efforts to date. Regardless of what you think of Jeremy Corbell, I found it to be well done, informative, and obviously there was some controversial elements of the 3-part series, and we'll use that as a segue to jump into what our good friend Jeremy Corbell revealed. We know that he revealed to the world this now extremely controversial video, the jellyfish UAP. Unfortunately, not incredibly compelling in the sense that it doesn't appear to be exhibiting any of the 5 observables. There's been a lot of debate and discussion on social media about this video since it was put out. I mean, I would love to see some higher quality, higher fidelity footage released to the general public, because unfortunately to date we've only really seen some pretty crappy and grainy videos. I mean, it's great that there are people in the military that are obviously entrusting Jeremy Corbell with their information, and there's information being put out. Is it being put out as misinformation or disinformation? Who knows? I mean, if you believe what the likes of what Hal Puthoff has said when he had a sit-down interview with Eric Weinstein and Jesse Michaels, he said that the US government has high fidelity, high quality footage of UAP, and when pressed on that, well, how higher quality? His response that it was comparable with 4K. So if there's some incredibly high fidelity, high quality footage within the holdings of the US government, we're seeing pretty crappy stuff. We're not seeing stuff that's all that exciting. So what do you think the jellyfish UAP was? Well, I still am of the opinion that this is what it was. Just a bit of fun for the Tron fans out there. So I when I first saw that was the first thing that came to mind, Tron. But let me show you more. Great to see my good friend Lou Reviews, Lou Jimenez. Thanks for joining, my friend. Good to see you, brother. And ahoy, welcome also from IO Walks. Thanks for joining. But on a slightly more serious note, well, one of, I think, the response videos to the jellyfish UAP that comes from someone that is in the military and may have a better idea as to what the jellyfish UAP can be attributed to is this gentleman.
So I wanted to weigh in on this jellyfish UFO or UAP thing. I've been using this same equipment. It looks like a Westcam infrared imager for about 5 or 6 years now. Got lots of hours on this equipment and looking at different objects through infrared. I'm afraid the most likely candidate, it's definitely a real object. It is definitely something outside whatever aircraft is recording it. It's not a smear on the lens or something like that. It wouldn't move. It would move with the target reticle if it was stuck on there. We do get bugs and things that stick on there, but they don't. When you move the lens, it moves with it because it's stuck to the lens. It's a real thing, but the fact that it doesn't accelerate or decelerate under its own power, it just kind of floats along like a balloon. This is probably a Mylar birthday balloon.
So pretty compelling response there as to a possible prosaic explanation. I mean, I think it's important that everyone be asking questions and trying to open source and get to the bottom of what this is. One of the problems that I think people are just too quick to jump to the conclusion that it must be non-human intelligence. I think that should be the last thing on the list. You should kind of tick all the boxes, dot the I's and cross the T's as to what it could be from a prosaic explanation. Rule those out before you then entertain something that's exotic and non-human intelligence potentially. So, and that's probably a good segue into, if I come back to my slide deck there, someone that I respect in the in this community. I'll just show this back on screen here. So Dr. Malcolm Davis, who is those that are in Australia know that he's often on the breakfast shows, Sunrise. He's often commenting on defense related issues. I respect his opinion, and I think he is a good voice to have in this conversation. He put out a tweet on the 10th of January, basically pertaining to the jellyfish UAP and the suggestion that might just be a collection of balloons. His comments were a sensible explanation for the space jellyfish UAP doing the rounds on UAP Twitter at the moment. The most likely explanation is usually the truth. Going with Occam's razor approach. He got a bit of pushback from his tweet that he put out there. Someone commented in response, does it explain the temperature changes of the object and going in and out of water? Dr. Malcolm Davis, no one has provided any evidence that that happened. All we have are video of what probably are some balloons. And I think, to his credit, Mick West has done some work on that. Well, it's not actually a temperature change. It's really just the sensor automatically adjusting that's showing what may look like temperature inversions. Response from Cass to Dr. Malcolm Davis, an AI-generated image of E&I balloons specifically made to fit the picture is likely the answer, ? And what if it's not balloons? Shouldn't we be asking questions anyway, even in the sense of national security? All bases should be covered. And I was actually, mentioned in that response. This is what I appreciate about Dr. Malcolm Davis. If it's not balloons, my guess is an artifact of in the imaging system. Obviously, we should be asking questions, which is why I totally support greater open discussion on UAPs, and we should be trying to get rid of the stigma associated with that. But we shouldn't be keeping to the least likely answer, i.e. this is a space jellyfish from Zeta Reticuli. The simplest explanation is usually the truth. And I support that comment. Again, it comes back to we shouldn't be so quick to jump to the conclusion that it's always going to be NHI. We should certainly ask questions and try and get to the bottom of what it is, but start with a prosaic explanation and then cross off those boxes before ending up at something that's a little bit more exotic. So I found that to be some interesting commentary from Malcolm Davis. Again, I respect his opinion. He's a senior analyst for the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, again, focuses on defense strategy and capability issues, including space policy and space security. What I also found interesting in TMZ's three-part series was this commentary from Ryan Graves. And I'll just play this on screen.
Out the pilots globally. I've spoken to pilots in Central America, South America, Europe, Middle East, Eastern Asia, Australia. These pilots are seeing the same things that are being seen off the eastern seaboard, off the western seaboard. Recognizing the need for action and answers, I founded Americans for Safe Aerospace.
This is an aspect of the UFO phenomenon that really caught people's attention, because if our pilots are in danger, if our pilots are having these near misses, then that's something we have to take really seriously.
Very interesting. I mean, what I found interesting in that commentary from Ryan Graves, that he's had pilots reach out to him from down under, from Australia. So there is obviously folks, whether it be commercial pilots, civil aviation, or perhaps in military, that are reaching out to him. For what reason? Could it be that they just know that the Australian Department of Defence, Civil Aviation Safety Authority, Air Services Australia is just not taking the topic seriously as a potential safety of flight risk? And again, I'm not saying, UAP could be a number of things. It should be all of those prosaic explanations first before we entertain that catch-all other bin of it being something else, potentially NHI. Everything should be on the table until it's not. But even, UAP more broadly, looking at all of the possible explanations, why isn't the Australian Department of Defence and Civil Aviation in Australia looking at it? And the fact that they're not could be one of the reasons why you have pilots, aviators reaching out to Ryan Graves to discuss their concerns and report what they're seeing that they can't reconcile in Australian airspace. So, it's just an interesting bit of commentary there from Ryan Graves. A couple of comments have come in the chats. Obviously want to give a bit of break as we go through and say hello to some folks. Jimmy just commenting there in response to Lou. Love, obviously, love for you to do a big phone home again, Lou. And for those that don't know, Lou Jimenez was really spearheaded the largest grassroots activism event called the Big Phone Home. He did 1, 2, and 3. That's really got me interested in getting off my backside and engaging my elected representatives on the topic. So I credit Lou with really helping me get off my ass and get into the game. Thank you for joining Short Order Cook number 1. Good to see you, my friend, and appreciate you taking some time out of your day to be here. So let's get into some of the other things that were happening on social media. Jeff Knox, who does some wonderful work, pretty much every day. He posts on X a day in, what happened on this day in UAP UFO history. I don't read, obviously, all of his posts pertaining to what happened on this day in the past, because often they're predominantly US centric, but this one caught my eye. He did a really good thread on Harry Turner. And Harry Turner, for those that don't know, he was really Australia's J. Allen Hynek. He took it upon himself to investigate and research the UAP UFO phenomenon in an Australian context for many decades over the years. And he was privy to a lot of sensitive and classified reports that were within the holdings of the Joint Intelligence Organization, the Directorate of Air Force Intelligence. And he actually put forth recommendations that a rapid intervention team, a crash retrieval team, be implemented for the Australian Defence Force for potential crash retrievals. Now, unfortunately, his work was kind of downplayed. His recommendations fell on deaf ears because he was seen to be supporting the work, or there was a perception that he was supporting the work of Donald Kehoe, who had suggested that UAP could be attributed to extraterrestrial intelligence. So I'm very unfortunate that Harry Turner's work was kind of downplayed purely because of his referencing of Donald Kehoe. What I found interesting, though, and you can have a look at Jeff Knox's thread on Twitter, a really interesting thread because, to Jeff's credit, he often cites a lot of links in his threads. So there is some really good information that you can learn about the reports that Harry Turner had submitted. He also references, obviously, the work of Bill Chalker. Keith Basterfield and Bill Chalker have done some really good research over the years on Harry Turner. I know Bill Chalker had interviewed Harry Turner before he passed away. So if you're interested to learn about the work of Harry Turner and his involvement in the UAP topic in an Australian context, I'd certainly encourage you to have a look at the links that are in Jeff's thread. Let's move away from Harry Turner, and we'll come back to some other stuff that's close to home. Moving on to this gentleman, Ryan Bledsoe of the Bledsoe clan. So those that have been following me know that I've been trying to pin down Chris Bledsoe on his alleged engagement with the Australian Department of Defence, who, again, Chris Bledsoe's claim that the Australian Department of Defence or an individual in the Australian Department of Defence took an interest in his experiences with the phenomenon and, quote, the lady. So Danny Jones had Chris Bledsoe's son, Ryan Bledsoe, on his podcast, the Danny Jones podcast. When was this? Back in December. And Ryan Bledsoe has his own podcast where he covers a range of issues, not just on the UAP phenomenon. So when I saw this interview that Danny Jones did with Ryan Bledsoe, I thought, well, here's an opportunity for me to try and see if I can get some additional information out of the Bledsoe family pertaining to their engagement with the Australian Department of Defence. This was a tweet that Ryan Bledsoe had put up on 9th of January, basically acknowledging that 17 years ago today, Chris Bledsoe Sr. went fishing with his son Chris Jr. and fellow contractors on the Cape Fear River. No one expected that this would change everything. Today, Chris Bledsoe is a name known by many for being one of the most investigated UAP experiences. So again, I responded to that tweet I said, Ryan, in the spirit of transparency, is your dad willing and able to share additional information on his engagement with AU DOD? If not, can you cite a reason why he's not in a position to share information? Was he asked not to? Was it classified in nature? Can you give me a reason why that information cannot be shared? Many thanks from Down Under. Now, I've never received any response from Ryan Bledsoe or the Bledsoe family. I've tried to reach out to Chris Ryan as well as Chris's daughter, and I've never received any responses from them. So whenever I see anything that pertains to the UAP topic and the Australian Department of Defence, that raises an alarm for me, or my ears pick up, and I try and get more information. If I see someone put a claim out there pertaining to UAP in Australia, I want to follow up on it. I want to get some, supporting documentary evidence pertaining to that claim. And I've done that time and time again. When Dr. Stephen Greer claimed that he had briefed a former Australian defence minister, I tried to chase down documentary evidence of that claim. I went after documents through FOIA and nothing ever came back. So I think Stephen Greer, unfortunately, exaggerates a lot of his engagement, and I don't think he had actually any meetings whatsoever with the Australian Department of Defence. That's just my inkling based on my inability to find any supporting evidence through the Department of Defence. Let's move away from the Bledsoe family. And actually, there was a few people that I follow and they follow me on social media that seconded my efforts. TP Loft 2008 said I would like to second this. Any commentary on the Bledsoes could provide regarding interaction with Australian Defence or intelligence would be greatly and honestly appreciated by many down under. Very true. And Jimmy, there many folks in Australia would like to know this. Again, we've never received any response from the Bledsoe family on their claimed engagement with the Australian Department of Defence. Let's move on. Move it along a bit. On the 5th of January, the ABC, the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, which receives partial funding from, or if not full funding, from the Australian government, put out an article that followed on from a podcast that was done, I believe, in November of last year. I can't quite recall. Anyway, it was kind of building on the podcast that they'd put out, and the tweet was, "What began as a craze in the 1940s became the subject of a secret US government program. Here's why politicians and scientists have started to take UFOs seriously." So I thought the article that they put out was actually a relatively decent, serious stab, because time and time again, those of us down under that have followed this topic know that the Australian legacy media likes to treat this topic with ridicule and stigma. So let me pull up for you the article that they had put out. I won't read through the article. It's linked in the description below, so if you do want to read it, feel free. But again, Taryn Priadko was the lady that did the podcast last year on her show called Rear Vision. I think it's linked in this article, or if not, you can just click on the link. And again, it kind of just is a decent article that goes through the history of a concise history of the UAP topic, from really the Roswell era and the Kenneth Arnold era of pre-Roswell 1947. And it kind of brings you up to speed on everything that's been happening since then through to the current era we live in with David Grusch and Congress taking the topic seriously. So again, I applaud Taryn Priadko's efforts and Nick Baker for not treating it with the ridicule and stigma that so many other outlets have done. It's worth a read, more so for those that are new to the topic and want to bring themselves up to speed. It's a good little primer. It's a good little introduction. Let's come back to our deck. Now, one of the things that I did do is I thanked ABC News, Taryn and Nick, for covering the topic. On the 5th of January, I tweeted, "Thank you, ABC News, for covering the UAP UFO topic. Could you kindly go one step further and press the Minister of Defence, Richard Marles, on why the Australian Department of Defence under his leadership, deceived a sitting senator and Australian taxpayers. Case in point, as we know, on the 19th of July, 2023, the Australian Department of Defence stated categorically that Australia did not attend a United States briefing on UAPs. Fast forward to 15 December 2023, and AUDOD makes a stunning backflip admission that Australia did in fact attend a United States briefing on UAPs in May 2023. Why the lie back in July? So, I don't want to be the only one that's asking these questions of the Australian Department of Defence and Minister of Defence. I think the Australian media should be asking these questions. So anytime I see an opportunity to enlighten them on the fact that there are some important questions that they should be asking of those that are in positions of leadership and authority in their government, they should, and not just do copy and paste journalism and, spew out what we see coming out of the media in the United States. It's great that they're covering it, but it would be much more appreciated if they actually covered the potential implications closer to home and the UAP topic in an Australian context. So those were my 2 cents on that front. Just a few comments to raise. Jimmy, it's all crickets from the Bledsoes. Unfortunately, it indeed is. And thank you, TP Loft 2008. You would like to joining from X. Thanks for tuning in. Would like to second that a response from the Bledsoe family. Again, still haven't got one to date. For those that follow me on social media, you'll know that I've been following closely or trying to do some research on the famous Westall incident of the 6th of April, 1966. So, Shane Ryan, who's been the lead investigator and researcher on the Westall incident now for well over a decade, has done some truly wonderful work trying to dig up documentary evidence on what could be attributed to what was observed in the skies above Westall High School, and that was alleged to have hovered near, descended or landed near the Grange, a densely wooded area about a K south of the school. And I kind of followed Shane Ryan's lead, and I took myself down to the Victorian office for the National Archives of Australia, which is also the Public Record Office for Victoria, to see if I could track down any documents, because I'd been given a couple of leads that might be worthy of following up. Now, unfortunately, I went through a stack of documents from the Royal Australian Air Force, and unfortunately, I didn't find anything pertaining to Westall. So, but those of you that are interested to get answers to questions that maybe you have on a particular case or Australia's history with the UAP topic, you can actually visit the National Archives of Australia in person, or you can request records via their website. So if there's, for example, I only not so long ago assisted someone I engage with every now and then on Twitter. Benny was asking for some information, or my thoughts on how he could try and track down records from the National Archives pertaining to the Frederick Valentich case of the late 70s. So, you can certainly make some inquiries with the National Archives, and they can assist you with your efforts to try and track down documents. So again, just for your awareness, if you want to try and find records pertaining to a case that interests you, or just Australia's history in the topic, you certainly can. So what else happened in January? Actually, while before I move on, let me just say, Short Order Cook asked a question sorry, let me come back. Mark, I should say, makes the comment: there's been a lot of activity of the south and southwest of Brisbane lately, lights in the sky, random movements, etc. Sky Order Cook 1, did anyone get any footage? I know that only recently someone had posted some footage from one of the cricket test matches in Victoria. They saw something that looked odd on the live broadcast, and they posted that on social. So, if there is any footage, Mark, that people are able to share on social, or Facebook, X, Twitter, whatever it might be, just open source it and let people look at it. Again, I always encourage people, if they've got footage of something, put it out there so people can take a look at and they form their own opinion. I don't think, again, we should jump to the conclusion that it's going to be NHI, but that's the whole idea. You want to ask questions and try and tick the boxes and cross things off the list. Mark, there is a new Brisbane Facebook group with UFOs, quite a lot of activity and videos. So perhaps Mark and Short Order Cook One, you can engage and share some links pertaining to that group. All right, so let's move away from my visit to the National Archives of Australia office in Victoria and talk about a wonderful YouTube channel, The Y-Files, which covers a lot of fringe topics, but I find it to be a very entertaining channel. AJ and Hecklefish do, I think, a good job of making keeping the topic light. They have some interesting thoughts on the topic, and obviously AJ has an incredible research team. I think he covers off on the topics he does really, really well. Good introductory content, and he's one of the things I appreciate about AJ is it doesn't necessarily form an opinion. He'll just put the information out there. He'll look at both sides of the argument, and he'll just put it out there for people to draw their own conclusions. But what I found really interesting about this particular episode, it's a cracker of an episode. If you haven't seen it, do have a look at it, because in this particular episode, AJ and Hecklefish, they're covering the remote viewing work of Ingo Swann, Pat Price, and Joe McGonigal in what was called Project 8200, which was a secret UFO or a secret CIA program, I should say, that used psychic spies to remote view locations around the world, including alleged underground alien bases. And wouldn't you know it, one of those bases was located down under. So let me play for you a clip from the Y-Files, and obviously I'll put my little banner up here. I'm showcasing this in the interest of fair use. We're educating the public, critiquing the videos we share, and this is permissible by law. So this is a clip that I found interesting from this recent episode of the Y-Files.
Joe was told the coordinates of Mount Seal in Australia.
The yawning entrance to a underground cave. Black doorway. Like a smooth dome of concrete. A black hole. The storage site of some kind. I see just a collage of things buried. Just coils. Keep seeing boxes of electronics.
Under Mount Seal, Joe sees another facility with advanced technology. Then he sees something familiar.
Keep envisioning control centers. You've been getting visions of all the command and control centers that I've ever been in.
Joe describes an underground command center. Later, other remote viewers would describe consoles and screens, and what sounds a lot like NORAD.
Reference to caretaker personnel. Do you have visuals of them, or?
No, I just perceive like a watchdog force or something there.
What kind of emotional impact was this on them?
Oh, I have a very sinister feeling for this target.
Mount Seal, Northern Territory, Australia. Now, I was really not aware of this Project 8200 until I watched this episode of the Y-Files, and I know that there are some fans of the Y-Files out there. I'm a big fan of the content that they put out. Mark is also a fan of the Y-Files, and Hecklefish for president indeed. So look, it just a really interesting episode. I was never aware of that claim that one of these remote viewers, Joe McMonigal, had remote viewed this underground base in Mount Seal in the Northern Territory of Australia. So I found that to be incredibly fascinating. And there was also another line from that Y-Files episode that was also interesting towards the back end of the show. So let me play that for you as well.
confirmation of UFO bases, that's when Skip Atwater decided he'd had enough. His project had limited resources, and if other agencies found out they were spending so much time searching for UFOs, that could be the end of the project and the end of many people's reputations. But something was nagging Skip. He kept asking himself, is any of this true? Well, he knew the CIA station chief in Northern Australia, so decided to give him a call. He asked his friend in Australia, hey, is anything unusual happening down there? The guy said, nah, this is a dead assignment. Well, except for all the UFOs flying around Mount Zeal.
CIA station chief in Northern Australia. Now, for context, who is Skip Atwater? He was the project manager, I believe, for that remote viewing effort. So Skip Atwater, he was trying to verify some of the claims that were being made about these underground alien bases. So if that's true, that Skip Atwater had reached out to this CIA station chief in the Northern Territory of Australia, and that they were saying, oh no, all this UFO activity out by Mount Zeal, is that some corroborative supporting evidence? Who knows? It could be true, it could be not true. So I decided to kind of dig into Mount Zeal a little bit because I really didn't know much about Mount Zeal, other than what I had heard in this episode of the Y-Files. So let me show you what is quite interesting about Mount Zeal. Now, this is Mount Zeal. For those of you that are wondering what it looks like, pretty decent height, decent size. So if there is some form of underground base, you imagine that it's not inconceivable that there could be some underground facility under a tall mountain like that. And what is interesting, one of the Google images, and I think TP Loft 2008 saw this on Google, is there's actually a sign. I don't know if this is a fake sign or if it's the one that someone's just photoshopped, but Mount Zeal Intergalactic Shopping Mall located 600 meters below your feet. So someone obviously having a bit of a laugh about the supposed history and lore of Mount Zeal. So let's have a look at Mount Zeal though. Let's pull up. I want to show you Google Earth, because if I type in Mount Zeal, this will give us kind of a sense as to what Mount Zeal looks like in the immediate surrounds. So again, you can see it's a pretty sizable mountain. But what is really interesting is, wouldn't you know it, Mount Zeal is less than 200 kilometers from Pine Gap. A very, very mysterious joint operated Australia and United States military installation. Now, there's Pine Gap's been shrouded in mystery for many, many years, and in his book In Plain Sight, Ross Coulthart references reports of anomalous objects or sightings of anomalous objects in the skies above Pine Gap. So the fact that you've got Mount Zeal less than 200 kilometers from Pine Gap, and they've got all this reported secrecy about Pine Gap and these sightings in Pine Gap, is there a connection? And the CIA station chief that Skip Atwater supposedly had contacted, well, I wouldn't be surprised if that CIA station chief was stationed at Pine Gap. And what's really interesting about Pine Gap is, let me come back to the deck here. I saw a tweet that someone had put out on X. If I can find it. by Nasty One Reborn. He put it out on the 9th of January this year. Who runs Pine Gap Spy Base, Alice Springs, Australia? It's not Australian government or military. It's the USA, the CIA, and the NSA. Not one Australian Prime Minister has been allowed to venture underground there. What happens there? And that's true. I think the Australian government, there's former Australian Prime Ministers, Gough Whitlam, tried to get to the bottom of, well, what the hell is going on at Pine Gap? What is the US using it for? Australia should at least have some knowledge. It has a need to know on what's happening on its sovereign territory. There's never been any real explanation as to what goes on at Pine Gap. And certainly the Australian government has not really had a full understanding of what the operations are that go on there. And there was a follow-up tweet. There was a tweet actually at the end of last year, 24th of December, study of UAPs, UFOs. Deb, she has a great channel, Deb's Data Dojo. She interviews folks. She's a member of the UAP Medical Coalition. So she certainly has interviewed folks that are experiencers and have had health-related issues with UAP. That's her line of interest, but she's got some good interviews on her channel. If you want to pull up her profile on X, you'll probably get linked to her channel. But she mentioned me, said, when you are looking at fast walkers, which we know that the US has used the terminology as fast walkers for UAP, and DSP, which I'll mention in just a moment, and it leads to Pine Gap. And so she added this link in this tweet. And what's really interesting about this link, if I pull it up for you, is that it links to this document from the Nautilus Institute, Hiding from the Light, the establishment of the joint Australia-United States relay ground station at Pine Gap. So there were some efforts over the years to try and, members, Freedom of Information Act requests, and obviously those that are politicians within government trying to get to some information on, well, what actually happens at Pine Gap, because again, it's really shrouded in mystery. So what is interesting, if we pull up DSP, which is what Deb was referencing in her tweet, DSP is Defense Support Program, and if I show you, there is a paragraph in this document. Let me just pull it up for you. I found this one to be quite interesting. Today, the relay ground station at Pine Gap consists mainly of 4 large antennas in radomes and 3 small ones occupying a compound on the western side of the Joint Defense. That's the acronym for Pine Gap, essentially. About 250 meters west of the more numerous antennas dedicated to Pine Gap's principal role of collecting signals intelligence. So that's one of its primary functions. In addition, 2 large communications antennas and several small antennas dedicated to transmission of the DSP and SBIRS, which is space-based infrared satellite or system satellite data, transmission of Defense Support Program and SBIRS satellite data to the United States are located in the northeast corner of the main compound. The 2 main communications antennas provide a link to the SBIRS Mission Control Station at Buckley Air Force Base, AFB, near Denver, Colorado, and to the Mission Control Station backup at Shriver, AFB, near Colorado Springs, and to the mobile ground stations. After processing at Buckley, so after that data is processed at Buckley, some data is relayed back to Australia, to HMAS Harmon in Canberra, to the Defence Department at Russell Hill, to the Headquarters Joint Operations Command at Bungadore, and the No. 1 Remote Sensor Unit, 1 RSU at RAF Base Edinburgh, north of Adelaide. 1 RSU operates an Australian mission processor at Edinburgh to generate intelligence derived from the DSP and SBIRS satellite data applied to Australian security needs. So the question is, if there is UAP data being collected and that is being processed at those Air Force bases in the United States, and some of that data is then relayed back to Australia. Well, we know that Pine Gap has Australians employed at Pine Gap, military personnel. Now, in what capacity, we don't know. So if some data is relayed back to Pine Gap, is that data sanitized? Is it raw data? Is there the potential for Australian personnel at Pine Gap to be exposed to UAP related data? If anything is captured via satellite, are there Australian personnel, Australian members of the Australian Defence Force that are exposed to UAP related data? Now, that would be a really interesting question to get some clarity on, because what is, if we come back to, again, the role of Pine Gap, well, what is publicly known about Pine Gap, and this is really just basic information on Wikipedia, we know that, and this is the key paragraph here, the station is partly run by the US CIA, NSA, and the NRO. All three of those three-letter agencies we know have in the past captured UAP-related data and have actually been referenced in the reports that have been released by the ODNI to date. I think it was the UAP preliminary assessment and the annual reports. Those three-letter agencies were referenced in those reports from the ODNI as being, agencies that contributed data to the compilation of that report. So if the CIA, NSA, and the NRO has in the past and does currently to date collect UAP data via their assortment of satellites, again, what potential data is Australian personnel exposed to that's UAP related at Pine Gap? The classified NRO name for the Pine Gap base is Australian Mission Ground Station, while the unclassified cover term for the NSA function of facility is rainfall. So there are some programs. NSA has a global interception surveillance effort called the Echelon program. So it just begs the question, what data is what data is Australian personnel that maybe work at Pine Gap potentially exposed to? And, some of the military activities that we know of at Pine Gap more recently during the 2023 Israel-Hamas war is alleged that Pine Gap provided the Israeli Defense Force with communications, electronic intelligence, which it collected using two geosynchronous Orion satellites located over the Indian Ocean. So again, what data, UAP-related data, could Australian personnel working at Pine Gap be privy to? It's an interesting thought. Let's move away from the Y-Files and Pine Gap, and I'm going to go with some comments that have come through in just a short while. Actually, I might jump over to a couple that have come through. Yes, indeed, Jimmy. Pine Gap, indeed. Yes, and as you've seen there, Jackie, Mount Zill is near Pine Gap. Dark Journalist did an episode on Pine Gap in their X series a couple of years ago. I haven't seen that. I'll be interested to have a look at that. Mark goes on to say, ABC did a great series, dramatic series on Pine Gap. It's on iView. I haven't seen it. I've heard about it though. I'll be keen to have a look at it. Jimmy says Pine Gap facility has some data on UAPs. Has that to do with signals intelligence? And I know TP Loft 2008 has actually done some research on Pine Gap and obviously those Air Force bases in the United States that have satellite data relayed to them. So if you're interested to have a look at his research, do have a look at the that link on X. Jimmy is of the opinion it's all filtered data that Australia receives. There's a couple of the links that TP Loft 2008 has put in, and goes on to comment, we almost certainly receive filtered information. So as that sanitized information, sanitized data that has anything pertaining to UAP removed. Some good comments. Subsequently, even though rainfall might see space vehicle activity, we, Australia, may potentially have zero access to that information unless Buckley or USJ-751 NSA/CSS Cryptologic Center Colorado NSAC says we can access it. So again, it's an interesting thought. It's an interesting question, and I applaud T. Puloff 2008's efforts to kind of dig into that particular topic. Let's have a look at a few other comments from a U.S. sovereign point of view. This is understandable, as the U.S. do not necessarily want anyone else knowing who or what they're looking at with their own assets. There is the over-the-horizon radar, Jindali over-the-horizon radar, is mentioned there briefly. Works really well. I know a guy who worked getting it going. The Yanks were pissed off because we could see the B-1 bombers even before it was fully running. Interesting. So yeah, definitely, Pine Gap remains shrouded in mystery, and just a really interesting connection of all these stories about UAP-related activity on an alleged underground alien base at Mount Zeal, which is less than 200 kilometers away. So interesting. Let's soldier on. Let's talk about an unfortunate case of reporting from the Australian news media. So the Today Show, and credit to the Today Show and Sunrise and the Project. I mean, they do cover the UFO UAP topic whenever there's something that's breaking or there's develops in the United States. To their credit, they cover it. But again, it's very much copy and paste journalism. Often it's ridicule. It's riddled with stigma and ridicule. They'll play the bloody X-Files music on over the segment, or they'll just take the piss out of the topic. And unfortunately, fortunately, they covered off on the last month the House Oversight Committee, members of the House Oversight Committee, the likes of Tim Burchett, Jared Moscovich, Anna Paulina Luna. They had a meeting with the Intelligence Community Inspector General in a skiff, and the Today Show was covering this upcoming ICIG skiff meeting, and they decided to invite someone that they thought could provide some context for that upcoming ICIG skiff meeting, a gentleman by the name of Matt Agnew, who's an astrophysicist. And this is just for your reference. This is what was covered during the segment. Let me pull this up for you so you can see. I won't play the whole interview. I'll just play parts that I think are irrelevant.
UFOs really exist, and while we may not have a definitive answer, a classified briefing in the United States later this week is set to discuss whether the famous flying objects could be real.
So to tell us more, we're joined this morning by astrophysicist Dr. Matt Agnew, live from Melbourne. Good morning to you, Matt.
Good morning.
Tell us what this briefing is all about and what it's going to discuss.
Yeah, look, so there's been a couple of these briefings last year, and essentially they're congressional hearings to have a bit more transparency about spending. So there's huge amounts of money that's being spent on these things. There's billions of dollars, and essentially Congress wants to know where it's going and what it's actually being spent for. There's a lack of oversight and understanding about where it's going, and so ultimately it's about that. The briefing is private, and there's going to be aspects pertaining to national security, and that's why there's going to be this element of secrecy to it still, despite it being a congressional hearing.
So last year there was a former intelligence official who turned whistleblower, making claims that the US government had recovered UFOs in its possession. I mean, are they holding on to all this evidence of the little green men that none of us are privy to?
I'd be staggered if they were holding on to unidentified objects that were extraterrestrial in nature. The hearing by, I think it was Grusch was the person who gave the evidence in the congressional hearing, but a lot of it was a friend of a friend, or someone told me they saw this, and it had this real kind of, my uncle works at Nintendo energy to it. So, look, there's still a lack of evidence, and ultimately that's what all of this boils down to.
Oh man, talk about, up until that point you were doing pretty well. You're actually, speaking relatively sensibly on what was going on, but you completely mischaracterized David Grusch's testimony. A friend of a friend. You've gone full Bill Nelson, and you have completely mischaracterized David Grusch's testimony. He interviewed 40 witnesses over 4 years, many, if not all of them, having direct firsthand knowledge of what he was investigating. Fraud, waste, and abuse. These black budget programs being withheld from U.S. Congress in terms of oversight. And he had referred a number of them to the ICIG, the Intelligence Community Inspector General, to make a protected disclosure. So it just really frustrates me that the Today Show could have done such a better job of getting someone that's maybe a little bit more in tune with the topic and speak a little bit more intelligently on, David Grusch's testimony, because it doesn't do you any favors when you're just saying, it's a friend of a friend, or Uncle Bob, or it just, you got to be respectful and get that information right, because it wasn't a friend of a friend. He was doing his job, and he investigated allegations of these clandestine crash retrieval reverse engineering programs, and he interviewed 40 witnesses over 4 years, and you completely mischaracterized the nature of his testimony. Now, what's even more frustrating is, for those of you don't know who Matt Agnew is, this is really what kind of got under my skin. He's the Bachelor, Australia's Bachelor. He was on a couple of seasons ago. He is an astrophysicist, but you think, come on, Today Show, get someone that's going to be a little bit more taken a little bit more seriously than The Bachelor. No disrespect to Matt Agnew or his profession, but I mean, the optics of inviting The Bachelor on to comment on the current state of play on the UAP topic, and David Grusch, and then completely mischaracterize his testimony. You can do a lot better. And I called him out on that. I said, while your ongoing coverage of the UAP UFO topic is appreciated, the Today Show, next time you're in need of an informed guest to provide intelligent and pertinent commentary on the topic, could you please do better than booking The Bachelor? And I think that's a fair call. While no disrespect to Matt Agnew, his profession, there are a ton of seasoned and well-informed Australian researchers that would be willing to come on and educate your viewers. So again, just unfortunate that they had The Bachelor on to opine and comment on the current state of play on the UAP topic. A bit on the frustrating side there. And I think there are a few people that share my frustration as well. I appreciate your vote of confidence there, Paul. Today's show could easily have had either yourself on Ross or Ross on. Yes, I believe Ross would obviously have been one to add a lot more credible commentary to the conversation. The fact that he is an Australian, he's well in tune with what's happening on the UAP topic in an Australian context, and obviously the fact that he has been at the forefront of a lot of the reporting on the UAP topic out of the US. Short order, quick one, fair comment. We hardly ever see Australians best and brightest on the UFO media. Yep, sadly, that is the case. And this isn't the first instance where astrophysicists have been called out for weighing in on the UAP UFO topic. In point of fact, it was actually only Gary Nolan that chimed in recently. On the 18th of January, Dr. Becky Smethurst commented on X, said, so it turns out something I said in a YouTube video has been jumped on by UFO enthusiasts, and then bizarrely the Spectator, which is obviously an outlet, media outlet. I said that in 2024 we could see a claim of a biosignature found in the atmosphere of an exoplanet with JWST, James Webb Telescope. This was just an enthusiastic and hopeful guess. Gary chimes in quotes, with a question mark, enthusiasts. Enthusiasts? Isn't it kind of, Arnold chimes in, isn't it kind of odd when people supposed to be at the forefront of discovery completely belittle a subject and anyone who takes an interest into it because it doesn't fit their model of science? Feels a bit counterintuitive to what science is. And I found this comment of particular relevance to Matt Agnew, the former Bachelor, being on the Today Show to comment on the state of play of the UAP topic. Gary's comments were, well, I always wonder why astronomers and astrophysicists are the go-to for discussions on UAP. Their expertise is looking at things so far away that most of their conclusions, especially about life, can never be verified. Very safe because you can caveat the heck out of your statements. They will get signatures. All is well and good, and I'm excited about that. But asking an astrophysicist, and this ties back to what we're talking about with Matt Agnew, but asking an astrophysicist about UAP is like consulting a deep sea marine biologist for advice on desert wildlife. You'd think they'd be excited to talk to alleged makers of supposed craft who might be able to tell them which of their theories are in the right direction and which are not. I feel for Dr. Smethurst because I know what it's like to be misquoted and assigned statements you didn't make. Opinions are just that, but newspaper and media turn them into conclusions. Welcome to the club, Dr. Becky. Don't worry, the water's tepid. So just I found it to be an interesting comment from Dr. Gary Nolan pertaining to astrophysicists always wanting to chime in on the UAP topic. Let's now move to something else that happened in January. So on the 11th of January, Defense Scoop put out an article basically revealing that AARO has, by way of the Deputy Secretary of Defense, Kathleen Hicks, that AARO is on track to reach FOC full operational capacity by September 30 of this year. And so just to pull up for you the Defense Scoop article, and this was by Brandy Vincent, who does some wonderful reporting on the UAP topic. Let me just pull this up for you so you can see it. And get rid of the ad there. So for Defense Scoop's article, Pentagon's UAP investigation hub works to reach full operational capability. Not capacity, but capability. One of the comments that was interesting, one of AARO's top priorities in 2023 was to codify and staff unit manning document to full operating capability. And in August, Kathleen Hicks, Deputy Secretary of Defense, said she was looking forward to the office achieving the status of full operational capability in fiscal year 2023, so end of September, without sharing exactly when. AARO is completing personnel hiring for its fiscal year 2024 authorized billets and is working to ensure adequate facilities for its growing team. AARO is currently on track to reach FOC by end of fiscal year 2024. Susan Goff, Pentagon spokesperson on UAP, said in December the still growing office was employing more than 40 personnel around the same time AARO's inaugural director, Sean Kirkpatrick, retired and leadership was transferred to its new acting chief, Tim Phillips. So that article is in the description below. If you do want to have a look at it, feel free. But really why we're talking about that article is because the Liberation Times, if I pull up their article, on the 17th of January, if I just do a quick search on Kirkpatrick, there we go. The Liberation Times, which is Christopher Sharp's outlet, he reported in his article, the AARO is notably currently without a director, a full-time director, following the departure of Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, but Susan Goff did confirm that the former director will continue his involvement as an unpaid consultant. So Sean Kirkpatrick is still involved in AARO, but from a consultancy standpoint, and as not being paid for his consultancy. The department will continue to leverage Dr. Kirkpatrick's experience as needed and available as an unpaid consultant. While no confirmation has been made regarding Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick's replacement, Liberation Times understands that Acting Director Timothy Phillips is open to engaging more with the UAP advocates. It's promising, perhaps in response to widespread criticism directed at Dr. Kirkpatrick and his handling of whistleblowers. So I just found that an interesting piece that Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick is still involved with AARO in an unpaid consultancy, from an unpaid consultancy standpoint. And that is then a perfect segue for us to jump into what everyone was talking about earlier in the middle of last month, or towards the end of last month. Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick's op-ed in Scientific American. So Scientific American put out a tweet exclusive. A forthcoming investigational report from an office of the Pentagon has found no evidence of aliens, only allegations circulated repeatedly by UFO claim advocates. Now, when I read this article, what jumped out at me straight away was, if I can pull it up for you, here we go. This is linked in the description below. So if you haven't read this op-ed from Sean Kirkpatrick, I would encourage you to do so. I'm just going to do a quick search on the word transparency because I found this paragraph laughable. This is from Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick. I can assure you, as its former director, that AARO is unwaveringly committed to harnessing science and technology to bring unprecedented clarity to these fascinating, important, and stubborn mysteries, and to do so with maximum transparency. Maximum transparency. So that was what I found to be laughable, because we come back to the deck that I have. And again, I raised this in a tweet. It's a little hard to read, so I'll read it out to you. So I put out a quote tweet of that article. Former AARO director and current unpaid AARO consultant, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, comes out swinging in a new op-ed article in Scientific American. And we'll talk about comes out swinging in just a moment. On review of the article, I find the following quote from Dr. Kirkpatrick particularly laughable. And it was the quote I just read. I can assure you, as its former director, that AARO is unwaveringly committed to harnessing science and technology to bring unprecedented clarity to these fascinating, important, and stubborn mysteries, and to do so with maximum clarity. Forgive my skepticism, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, but AARO's complete lack of communication strategy and community engagement to date does not instill much confidence, nor does it bode well for building public trust. Case in point, AARO has not upheld its commitment to provide updates and information through its official and dedicated social media channel, and I put images in the tweet. If AARO's official X Twitter account can amass 37,000 plus followers with only 2 posts since July 2022, mid-2022, imagine what audience it could attract and the trust it could rebuild with frequent and informative engagement. So again, AARO has only put out 2 tweets since it established its X account, and it said that it would provide updates and information. It's done none of that. It's put out 2 tweets and nothing else. Dr. Kirkpatrick, AARO has failed miserably under your former leadership and that of former controller of the purse strings, Ronald Moultrie, to build public trust. AARO, please do better in 2024 to uphold your commitment to maximum transparency. And I think that's a fair call because, how many of us that are well-versed in the topic, are willing to engage and actively follow AARO's account? And it could just be such a missed opportunity for them to not provide updates to the general public on social media, because how many members of the general public are going to jump onto the U.S. Department of Defense's website and read a press release or join a live stream by the Hayden Center where Dr. Sean, or read Scientific American? Social media is a powerful platform of getting out your getting the information out there, and they've failed miserably to exercise any engagement, and they've got no communication strategy whatsoever. And a few people have commented on that. So let's have a look at. Paul MP states, I find it highly questionable that Kirkpatrick was able to make public comment about the evidence received to date. Surely that's now prejudiced the outcome of his still to arrive report. It's a good point. Mark, AARO is basically to see what real info is out there so they can put in place functions to bunk it for the protection of their secrets. So there are real questions about the public's trust in AARO. You have reports of whistleblowers or not whistleblowers, but witnesses that have been directed to the Intelligence Community Inspector General to make a protected disclosure, because AARO cannot be trusted, or there is a real perceived lack of trust that AARO will do its due diligence in reporting information that comes their way, doing their due diligence on an investigation. I mean, you have an example of that is Robert Salas and another individual that was associated with not the Maelstrom incident, but another nuclear installation that had alleged UAP reported activity in the 60s. Both of those gentlemen, I think, were on with Matt Ford on the Good Trouble show, indicating that they were very dissatisfied with the efforts of AARO to document, to record their information. And one of those individuals didn't even sign off on the memorandum for record that AARO had provided. So there is a real sense of distrust in AARO, and I think for good reason. And so I'm hopeful that whoever is appointed or installed as Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick's replacement at least publicly shows a little bit more ambition and aggressiveness on the proactive front, as opposed to the public perception that AARO is just very reactive, which allegedly it has been. It has not been as proactive as many would like and expect. JP Cowes, Kirkpatrick is a decoy. AARO is set up to harvest information. I know that's been said before. Interesting. Alien Girl 111, thank you for joining, my friend. Great to see you. For those that don't follow Amy, jump on Alien Girl 111's YouTube channel. She does a morning breakfast show, and she's, I know, putting together a really cool documentary on her experience on UFO Twitter to date. So I'm looking forward to seeing that when it comes out. So thanks for joining, Amy. Short order, Cook One. People recognize the UFO diversion narrative. They've been saying the same thing for decades, just in different terms. That's an interesting point. So why do I pull up that quote that I put out, or that tweet that I put out there, calling out Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick and AARO's complete lack of transparency? Well, that's a good segue into, if we go back to, actually, by the way, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick then went on a podcast with Peter Bergen called In the Room. He expanded on his comments in that podcast. I don't think I've linked it in the description below, but if you just jump over to, if you're on Spotify, just type in the Room. One of the more recent episodes will be Peter Bergen with Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick. He just expands on his commentary a lot above and beyond what he indicated in the Scientific American op-ed. So let's come back to that op-ed, because I want to then call out what everyone's probably been talking about, which is, if we go back to his op-ed, whatever everyone kind of jumped on. There you go. I just want to read it. Okay, so I'll just read it. So after painstakingly assembling a team of highly talented and motivated personnel and working with them to deploy a rational, systematic and science-based strategy to investigate these phenomena, our efforts were ultimately overwhelmed by sensational but unsupported claims that ignored contradictory evidence yet captured the attention of policymakers and the public, driving legislative battles and dominating the public narrative. The result of this whirlwind of tall tales fabrication and secondhand or third-hand retellings of the same was a social media frenzy and a significant amount of congressional and executive time and energy spent on investigating these so-called claims, as if we didn't have anything better to do. The conspiracist's story goes something like this. The US has been hiding and attempting to reverse engineer as many as 12 UAP UFOs from as early as the 1960s and perhaps earlier. This great cover-up and conspiracy failed to produce any salient results, and consequently the effort was abandoned to some private sector defense contractors. That's a stab at Bass there, Bigelow Aerospace, to continue the work. Sometime later, the story continues. Those private sector contractors wanted to bring the whole program back under US government, USG auspices. Apparently, the CIA stopped the supposed transfer back to the USG. All of this is without substantiating evidence, but alas, belief in a statement is directly proportional to the volume in which it is transmitted and the number of times it is repeated, not the actual facts. During a full-scale, year-long investigation of this story, which has been told and retold by a small group of interconnected believers and others with possibly less than honest intentions, another dig, none of whom have first-hand accounts of any of this, AARO discovered a few things, and none were about aliens. First, no record exists of any president or living DoD or intelligence community leader knowing about this alleged program, nor any congressional committee having such knowledge. This should speak volumes if this case were following typical procedure, because it is inconceivable that a program of such import would not ever have been briefed to the 50 to 100 people at the top of the US government over the decades of its existence. And this is where I really wanted to highlight this paragraph. Second, this narrative has been simmering for years and is largely an outgrowth of a former program at the DoD's Defense Intelligence Agency, DIA, called the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, ATIP, which was heavily influenced by a group of individuals associated with businessman and longtime ufologist Robert Bigelow, founder of Bigelow Aerospace. In 2009, then Senator Harry Reid asked the Secretary of Defense to set up a SAP, a special access program, to protect the alleged UAP UFO material that ATIP proponents believed the USG was hiding. The Secretary of Defense declined to do so after a review by the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence, and DIA concluded that not only did no such material exist, but taxpayers' money was being inappropriately spent on paranormal research at Skinwalker Ranch in Utah. This is well documented in open sources, particularly in open records available on DIA's electronic FOIA reading room. After the negative response by Secretary of Defense, Senator Reid then enlisted the help of then Senator Joseph Lieberman to request that the Department of Homeland Security set up a SAP for the same purpose. The administrative SAP proposal package was informed by the same individuals who had been associated with ATIP. AARO's archival research has located the administrative proposal for the DHS SAP, complete with the participants, which has been declassified and is being reviewed for public release. And it'll be interesting to see what that is when it is released. And I'll just finish on this paragraph. Finally, the key purveyors of this narrative have known one another for decades. In the early 2000s, several members of this small group also participated in a study erroneously characterized by the same participants as having been sponsored by the White House on the possible societal impact of disclosing the existence of extraterrestrials to the public. Well, again, the term non-human intelligence has always been used, not extraterrestrials, with the authenticity of the above-mentioned concealed government program taken as its baseline assumptions. The think tank in question was a futures enterprise that often worked on fringe studies, and many of the individuals involved with the study also worked for Bigelow Aerospace in support of the ATIP program. And I'll kind of stop it there. So that's obviously, in complete contrast to the claims and allegations that have obviously been revealed by David Grusch and there are rumored to be other whistleblowers or first-hand witnesses that are rumored to be coming forward to back up that claim. So you have this kind of opposing arguments. Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick saying it's all BS, it's all a ruse, it's all the small group of believers, pushing BS, pushing their belief on members of Congress to try and get money to be devoted to the ongoing investigation of UAP and supported phenomena, paranormal activity, and so on. So why do I read that paragraph? Because I'll go back. This is why I wanted to bring this up. Here we go. So the man that everyone loves to hate, Stephen Greenstreet, on the 21st of January, he put out a tweet. Director of Pentagon's UFO office says the American public has been lied to about aliens and Congress has been duped by a group of dubious conspiracists. And he links the Scientific American article. This 100% supports my exclusive New York Post reporting. And he puts in a link and obviously a graphic. Wacky UFO activists and crazy, in quotes, so it's a direct quote, ghost hunters duped Congress into hunting UFOs. New York Post. So I decided to respond to Stephen Greenstreet's tweet and ask him this question. Do you have an opinion as to why he, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, referenced ATIP instead of ORSAP? And we know ORSAP, the Advanced Aerospace Weapons System Application Program, was the DIA-funded program, but it was also nicknamed, its moniker was ATIP. And then you have this your alleged then Pentagon ATIP program that was reportedly headed up by Lou Elizondo. So I asked Stephen Greenstreet this question for a good reason. And I wasn't the only one that was curious as to know why Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick had referenced ATIP rather than ORSAP in his article. Keith Basterfield, veteran, legend, Australian UAP researcher, supported what I was asking. I've been asking the same question, but can't figure out why. So why would Kirkpatrick reference ATIP if that never existed, outside of just being a moniker, a nickname? Why wasn't the actual program name of ORSAP referenced? The Average Chris, who is also on X, he quote tweeted Stephen Greenstreet's post, and I'll just read it for you because it's a bit small on screen. It says, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, former director of AARO, confirmed what Stephen Greenstreet put together in an extensive multi-year investigation into the inner circle dealings of UFO activists, and it all drawing back to the one place, ORSAP via Skinwalker Ranch. I encourage everyone, and then goes on to kind of read the article. So I responded to Average Chris, raising what was a flag for me. I responded to Average Chris saying, and yet ORSAP is not once referenced in Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick's op-ed. I find that incredibly odd, because we know that, whenever Colm Kelleher or George Knapp or James Lakatsky have talked about the DIA program, they've always talked about it as ORSAP. And James Lakatsky worked at the DIA, as did Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick. They both had a history working at DIA. Lakatsky's called it ORSAP, but Kirkpatrick has called it ATIP. Why? And yet ORSAP is not referenced in Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick's op-ed. I find that odd. Stephen Greenstreet replied to me. He mentioned it a few times, actually. He just used its nickname. This is where I have a problem with Stephen Greenstreet. And I replied to Stephen Greenstreet. I said, middle of mayhem, Stephen Greenstreet. So despite, it's a bit hard to read, so I'll read it out verbatim. So despite Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick never once, in his op-ed, never once referencing ATIP as just a nickname, in quotes, quoting what Stephen Greenstreet had posted in his tweet, never once referencing ATIP as just a nickname for ORSAP in his op-ed, thereby creating unnecessary confusion for the readers of Scientific American, a la in the same vein that the New York Times created confusion referencing ATIP was a $22 million program when it was ORSAP. Stephen Greenstreet, speak with certainty that he, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, was only referencing ORSAP's moniker, nickname ATIP. If your mission as an investigative journalist is to educate your audience on the truths, falsehoods, and ambiguities of ORSAP versus ATIP, why didn't you call out Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick on his lack of clarity when you've quite literally called out everyone else on the misnomer? And I put some images in my tweet. Or did you simply assume, Stephen Greenstreet, in your original post, that the readers of Scientific American are already aware of the confusing ORSAP ATIP lexicon? Regardless, I hope you recognize the double standard you've created for yourself. And I say that because these are some examples of where Stephen Greenstreet has corrected people on social as well as media outlets time and time again that it wasn't called ATIP, it was called ORSAP. And you can see on screen there where time and time again, he's, what's one of them that I like? ATIP. ATIP was just a nickname for ORSAP, a non-UFO program that was shut down in 2012. Another one. Where is it? Oh, he's talking about ATIP, which never existed. He must be talking about ORSAP, a non-UFO program, which he admits he intentionally did not inform Congress about in order to manipulate them into investigating UFOs. So he's corrected people time and time again that it's not ATIP, it's ORSAP. Well, why, Stephen Greenstreet, did you not correct Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick on his use of ATIP, even if it was a moniker, even if it was just a nickname? Why didn't you correct him and correctly reference the program as ORSAP? Stephen Greenstreet responded, the ATIP Kirkpatrick refers to is officially known as the Advanced Weapons System Applications Program, ORSAP. Yes, I'm well aware of that. The ATIP that Lou Elizondo claims to have been the director of never existed. This is very clearly laid out with evidence in my reporting. Okay, my response to that, the ATIP, and this is quoting Greenstreet directly, the ATIP Kirkpatrick refers to is officially known as the Advanced Weapons Systems Application Program, ORSAP. So my response to that statement from Greenstreet was, does Scientific American's worldwide audience of over 9 million know that to be the case? I would argue that they probably don't. And therein lies the rub, my friend. So a complete double standard when Greenstreet, you've called out many, many people time and time again on ATIP, even if it was the Pentagon ATIP, irrespective if it was the Pentagon ATIP or DIA nickname ATIP, you correct people time and time again, but you didn't in this case. You've corrected everyone on Pentagon ATIP, but you've never corrected Sean Kirkpatrick's use of DIA ATIP just to kind of correct the record for the audience of Scientific American, because they're probably not aware of the confusion that exists between ORSAP and ATIP. They're probably just going off what the New York Times reported in 2017. A post that Stephen Greenstreet he responded to someone, it wasn't me, it was someone else, I believe. The ATIP Kirkpatrick refers to as officially known as, it was that tweet that I showed you before. Someone responded to him, the saucer also rises. In my opinion, when saying the ATIP Lou describes never existed, then someone new to this could be confused thinking it was all completely made up afterwards, while we know there was, at the very least, an effort to gather info on military encounters with UAP. Context is needed to be fair. Stephen Greenstreet responded to that individual's post. I provided a link above which clearly lays it out for everyone confused or new to the topic. And my response, but Stephen Greenstreet, you failed to call Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick out on the confusion that has existed on ATIP since 2017 and his further muddying of the waters for the uninitiated. Why? Failing to do so only bolsters the perception of your confirmation bias. And I believe it does. I believe that if you're an investigative journalist, you need to call out inaccuracies and ambiguities when they're in front of you. Don't just call out and report on stuff that is not consistent with your narrative. Don't just push stuff that supports your confirmation bias. So that's where I had issues with the way that Greenstreet had posted, obviously reference to Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick's Scientific American article. And let me just call up a few. WixY77, great job. Keep up the good fight. Thank you for your kind words there. Mark says Greenstreet has Kirkpatrick on speed dial. Jackie, I'm grateful for your grounded approach. Creating confusion seems to be a consistent tactic to discredit the whole phenomena, as if the actual experiences aren't disestablishing enough. That is a very good point. So let me then move forward further. I found this tweet from Stephen Greenstreet only the other day to be incredibly interesting. The only thing, and this was in response, this is a reply that he had to someone else. So it's not a tweet on its own. I've just taken out the response that it was applicable to, but I found this comment to be particularly interesting. The only thing that could and should undercut my credibility would be inaccuracies and lies in my reporting, which there are none. Challenge accepted, Stephen Greenstreet. So I will be working on a project to call out your inaccuracies and some creative lies, perhaps, in an upcoming project. We need to talk about Stephen, because I think we really need to do. I think it's important that for all of the people that you have called out for their hustling, spooky hustlers, lies, inaccuracies, grifting, I think it's only important that we call attention to ways in which I believe you have been disingenuous with your audience. Some of your the way that you have portrayed yourself professionally versus personally is questionable at best. So I will be putting together some information based on our engagement to date, our direct engagement on social, where I believe you have not been completely genuine with your commentary. So I'll be calling attention to where I believe you've been disingenuous and you have engaged in some deception to maybe foster greater clicks and likes on your video documentaries that you've put out on the New York Post. So look out for that. Will be coming from me in the not too distant future. So let's move away from that, because I don't want to continue on the Greenstreet wagon. And one thing I will say to Stephen Greenstreet's credit, I think he's an incredibly talented documentary filmmaker. I wish I had his editing skills. I think he does really well presented, the production value on his documentary videos is exceptional. I think he does some really, really good work. I think he's actually a better storyteller than he is an investigative journalist. That's just my opinion. But I don't have any issue with the way he presents his content visually. I think he does a stunning job as an editor and as a filmmaker. I just call into question his approach in conveying maybe his narrative, and that's what I'll be calling attention to in a future project of mine. Not sure when I'll have it done by, but that's what I'm going to be working on. So want to move away from that. Let us talk about. Make sure I've got the right run sheet here. So let's now talk about this new proposed legislation that has been put forward to US Congress. So on the 11th of January, D. Dean Johnson, who does some really, really good work covering all things legislation pertaining to the UAP topic. So do give him a follow on X if you haven't already. He does some really good work. He reported on the 11th of January the civil aviation UAP reporting bill that has been introduced. and I just kind of put that out there on X for anyone that follows me. This proposed legislation is significant and a positive step forward for civil aviation in the US. Here's to hoping it passes. Australia's Civil Aviation Safety Authority, CASA, take notice. So who is the Civil Aviation Safety Authority? And I'll get into that in just a moment. Let me make sure I've got the right thing on here, because the USA Today on the 11th of January put out a really good article on this proposed legislation, and let me pull it up for you. I won't read the whole thing because, again, I don't want to go for too much longer, and I'm mindful of everyone's time that you've generously given me today, obviously walking you through this stuff. So let me pull this article by the USA Today on screen, titled UFO sightings and a first civilian pilots could report UAP to the FAA under the proposed bill. Essentially the first paragraph is probably the key one. So commercial airline pilots who witness crafts flying through the skies in inexplicable ways would be able to report the UAP sightings to the federal government under a House bill introduced Thursday. The bipartisan legislation comes months after House leaders heard testimony from military officers. We're talking about Ryan Graves and obviously David Fravor, of course, who described reports of mysterious objects outmaneuvering military jets. Within weeks of the public hearing, the Pentagon's Office to Investigate UFOs unveiled a website where military members and other government workers could make reports of sightings dating back to 1945. So this proposed bill will essentially require civil aviation, so general aviation and commercial pilots, to report observations of UAP. And it's not just limited to pilots. It's air traffic controllers, flight attendants, aircraft personnel, and so on. So really, I think significant legislation, because it will really then, I think, hopefully help reduce the walls of stigma around this topic at a commercial aviation level, because how many times have we heard historically where commercial pilots see something they can't reconcile in the sky, again, doesn't mean it's non-human intelligence, but see something they can't identify that could be has the potential to become a safety of flight risk, but they don't report it because of the stigma that's attached with the UFO. They don't want to, be faced with any reprisals or have a black mark or blemish placed against their record, or to miss out on a future promotion opportunity, or to be ridiculed by reporting UAP. And that's, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Steven Spielberg's wonderful movie of the 1970s. One of the opening scenes from that movie just paints that picture perfectly. It's so relevant still in this day and age in 2024. So let's come back to obviously moving away from the USA Today article. Ryan Graves also tweeted out that article, and I am a strong supporter and advocate for what Ryan Graves is attempting to do, which is to really promote this Americans for Safe Aerospace. He's trying to shine a light on the lack of reporting that exists for civil aviators, pilots, military aviators and pilots, trying to break down the walls of stigma associated with UAP, so that if pilots are seeing something they can't identify in the sky, which could be a safety of flight risk, they need to and they should report it. So I certainly give a big thumbs up and applaud Ryan Graves on what he's trying to do to shine a light on the need for reporting of UAP for pilots, both civil aviation pilots and military pilots. So by the way, Ryan Graves was recently on the Really podcast with Tom Wheeler and Dave Foley. Really interesting episode. I would encourage you to have a look at it if you're interested. The link is in the description below. And what I found to be really interesting in this particular conversation with Ryan Graves was basically, so Dave Foley, who I've been a fan of ever since he was on news radio in the mid to late 90s. He, in this conversation I'm going to show a clip of, he's basically talking about, he provides an analogy of pilots being trained observers and why their testimony of if they've got eyeballs on a target or on UAP, why it's important. So this kind of separates really out pilots as trained observers from everyday folks like you and I that, aren't trained observers in an air domain capacity. So let me show you this brief clip.
The comparison that, like, if you ask me to walk through a park and then at the other end of the park say, what plants did you see? Then I'll be pretty vague about it. And if you ask me, we're going to ask you what plants you're going to see in this park, walk through it, I'll be a little better. But if you ask a botanist to walk through that park, you're going to get a lot more detail. And so when, there are gradations of human witness, and it seems like fighter pilots are probably at the highest level of that gradation, because your lives depend on it. And also just
and our lives.
Yeah. And you've got
our lives depend on it.
And you've got those debriefings that are going to be hellish, I'm assuming, if you haven't been paying really close attention.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to disagree with anything you said there, Dave.
So I think that's a really valid and pointed analogy that Dave Foley provides there, because military pilots, they're trained when they're in an airspace or an air domain, they're trained to look out for stuff that could be a safety or flight risk. They know how to use their and read their senses. Does that mean they're not? It's not possible for them to misidentify or interpret information that they're seeing on their senses or with their eyeballs. Of course, we're not saying that's not the case. Of course, they can misidentify things, but when compared to you and I, if I went up in an airplane and I was in the airspace, I don't know what I should be looking for. I'll see something that's interesting, but I'm not taking into account all of the other things that are going on in my aircraft and my senses. So I think it's a really good analogy that Dave Foley provides, that, those folks that are in military aircraft, they are trained observers to look for, try and identify and mitigate the risks that are associated with things that they see in the airspace. Doesn't mean that they're not subject to misidentification, but they're a little bit better than you and I at knowing what to look for and perhaps identifying stuff in their airspace. So just a cool interview. Feel free to have a look at it. Links in the description below if you want. But let's come back to the slide deck, because I want to build on what we're talking about with respect to this proposed legislation that's been put forward, this civilian UAP reporting bill. So Congressman Robert Garcia, this is kind of now switching gears from domestic UA on the domestic UAP front. Things have been happening down under to more across the pond abroad. On the 12th of January, Congressman Robert Garcia put out a tweet. UAP reporting is critical to our national security and transparency. That's why I've introduced the Safe Airspace for Americans Act with Representative Grothman. Today, it would facilitate reporting of UAPs by civilian aviation personnel. Thanks to Safe Aerospace, which is headed up by Ryan Graves, for your partnership. And so I thought, okay, well, that's interesting to see that there is now proposed legislation that would require civil aviation pilots and personnel to report to the FAA. I wonder what the Australian Civil Aviation Safety Authority's thoughts are on this proposed legislation, and what the potential implications are for CASA in an Australian context if this legislation gets passed. So I put out a tweet on I think it was the same day. I've just shortened it for spacing on the screen. Following today's announcement of a proposed bill that would introduce UAP reporting for U.S. civil aviation pilots and personnel to the FAA, I reached out to Australia's Civil Aviation Safety Authority, CASA, for comment. Specifically, my questions were as follows. 1, if the proposed legislation is passed, what are the implications for CASA in the event US aircraft operating in Australian airspace, whether it be inbound or outbound, observe UAP and are required to report to the FAA? Number 2, will CASA commit to reviewing its current reporting protocols and consider implementing comparable UAP reporting and recording mechanisms? And then I put out basically the response that I received from CASA. So let me show you this was the email that I put out to CASA originally on the 12th of January. I've just redacted my contact details, obviously, so I don't get spam mail. But obviously, I submitted this inquiry via their media form on their website. You're basically stating what was in the USA Today's reporting, and obviously, asking those 2 questions of CASA. So their response came back. This is their response on the when was that, 12th of January. So same day, I get a response from the media team at CASA saying, "Hi Grant, thank you for inquiry. The following can be attributed to a CASA spokesperson. CASA's role as a government body is to regulate Australian aviation safety. The reporting of UAP is currently out of our remit." So really didn't address my question, didn't answer my question. Thank you for letting me know that you don't currently have any reporting mechanisms on UAP. I'm fully aware of that. I'm interested to know what the implications are for CASA if this proposed legislation gets passed. So I got pretty much a non-answer out of CASA. And so let's now look at another document. Here we go. This was, so, after pretty much the no luck with the Civil Aviation Safety Authority, I thought I'd reach out to and this email address is public on their site, so I'm not revealing anything that's sensitive or private. I reached out to Air Services Australia. And if you're not aware of Air Services Australia, they're essentially charged with looking after air traffic control in Australia, among other things, but they are really the body that manages the air traffic control in Australian airspace. And so I reached out to them with the same sort of question. I asked those 2 identical questions to Air Services Australia that I asked CASA. Now, do you think I've ever gotten a response from Air Services Australia? No, nothing from Air Services Australia, which I was pretty much expecting to get nothing from them, but I thought I'd give it a crack nonetheless. I'll still follow up with them to see if I can get a response, but nothing, unfortunately, to date. So why are we talking about, safety of flight with respect to UAP in Australian airspace? A tweet that Kevin, who I've had some engagement with on social media, he kind of put this graphic in a response to the tweet that I put out with CASA's response email. They're saying, reportable matters required by aviation law. So items that are immediately reportable for pilots is if there's an incident that results in death, serious injury, missing aircraft, seriously damaged aircraft, breakdown of separation with aircraft, any fuel mismanagement, and then further on down, routinely reportable matters. Got to report within 72 hours, non-serious injury to an onboard person, a near miss with terrain, near miss with fuel exhaustion or starvation, a near miss with an aircraft, incapacitation of any pilot, collision with an animal. So a near miss with an aircraft, well, that's exactly what the whole intention is behind this civilian UAP reporting bill that's been proposed in the US, because we know that the US Department of Defense has now confirmed that there have been 14 near misses with US DoD assets, fighter jets, and UAP. So there is a clear and present danger that UAP can pose to flight safety. And if you take into account that aircraft could represent UAP, then there should be a routine reportable matter for UAP incidents. Now, how many near misses have there been of UAP in Australia? I have no idea, because there's no reporting mechanism and there's a level of stigma that's attached to the topic. Why would anyone want to report a near miss with a UAP when, one, there isn't a reporting mechanism, and two, they're going to get ridiculed, ostracized, and they're going to have a blemish placed against their flight record if they say anything. So there needs to be some sensible say something, see something reporting mechanisms made available in Australia. And so Keith Basterfield, and I've put a link to his blog article in the description below. He put together a bit of a summary, a look at the air safety and UAP related issues from both the Australian context and the US viewpoints. How, again, Australia and the US closest of allies, but they could not be further apart on the UAP topic when it comes to UAP. That's within government at an Australian Department of Defence and a US Department of Defence level, and also within civilian aviation, the FAA versus the Civil Aviation Safety Authority and Air Service Australia's mindsets, their opposing views on UAP. Mind-boggling that Australia is just completely waving off the UAP and saying it's not an issue that we down under need to be aware of. So if you want to have a look at that article, that blog article from Keith Basterfield, do check it out. Again, I've linked it in the description below. There is just some good information on the differences between air safety and UAP in an Australian versus a US context. So feel free to have a look at that article if you're interested. So that then brings us to moving away from the civil aviation UAP reporting bill that's been proposed. Let's now talk about something else that happened in January, which was a big one. The members of the House Oversight Committee for Accountability and Oversight meeting with the Intelligence Community Inspector General in a skiff to discuss the allegations that David Grusch had put forward in his complaints to the ICIG. So after that ICIG skiff meeting that I think 16 members of the House Oversight Committee attended, Jared Moskowitz, one of the House Oversight Committee members, posted on X, based on what we heard, so this is the same day, immediately after the skiff, based on what we heard, many of Grusch's claims have merit. Now, that's an interesting statement. Now, I would have loved to have seen a follow-up question of Jared Moskowitz when he was in front of the porters. Well, what claims specifically have merit? So we don't know. And this is where you should give, you should certainly give Ask a Poll. Matt Laszlo is doing some really good work, getting some great commentary and audio bites and comments from members of Congress when they come out of a meeting. So he's often roaming the halls of Capitol Hill, waiting for folks to come out of a hearing or a briefing or a meeting, track them down, and just try and get their thoughts on whether it be UAP in general or Grusch or where things are at. So we're actually getting a lot of great information from Matt Laszlo. So do consider giving him a follow on his social, Ask a Poll, and he's got a good website where he shares a lot of these audio recordings. So that was an interesting post from Jared Moskowitz. Based on what we've heard, many of Grusch's claims have merit. Now, which of those claims, again, specifically have merit? We don't know. And it would be very interesting to know what those are specifically. We then had a post from House Oversight Committee member Anna Paulina Luna coming out and saying, I feel confident that we have enough evidence to move forward with our first field hearing. We will be announcing details soon. So it sounds like, if you listen to what the members of the House Oversight Committee have been saying when they've come out of this SCIF meeting that they've been potentially given some breadcrumbs as to who they should be asking questions of, maybe of defense contractors, where they should be focusing their efforts and directing their next lines of inquiry. So interesting to see how this will take shape, where this field hearing will be. As Tim Burchett has said, a field hearing is basically mean they go to the geography of where perhaps a witness is located, or I think the analogy that Anna Paulina Luna gave is if they're working on an issue pertaining to the border crisis, they might travel down to the US-Mexican border, have a hearing, not outdoors, but they might have a hearing in an official hearing room, but in the general vicinity of or location of where their focus is. So it would be very, very interesting to learn where that field hearing is going to be. Now, I put out something for a bit of fun in the wake of, and one of the other quotes actually Anna Paulina put out there, UAP Caucus, they're another group that does some great work in terms of trying to encourage people to activate themselves and advocate for the UAP topic and engage their elected representatives. UAP Caucus posted out at least 34% of the House Oversight Committee, 16 of the 47 members attended this morning's classified briefing on UAP with the ICIG. This is an improvement from the attendance level at the DODIG briefing on the 26th of October, which is true. People came out of that briefing almost looking pretty dejected and demoralized, and they kind of had, to a degree, they looked like they'd been reinvigorated after they came out of that ICIG SCIF. Anna Paulina Luna quote tweeted, "Yes, we're making headway." So again, it sounds like this is an issue that they're not abandoning. If anything, what they've heard from in that SCIF meeting with the ICIG has only empowered them further, and they feel they're more resolved than maybe they were before on continuing to press for answers and get greater transparency on this topic and get to the bottom of the allegation of fraud, waste, and abuse, because that's really at the crux of what they're trying to do. They're trying to expose waste, fraud, and abuse and mitigate waste, fraud, and abuse. And that's the heart of David Grusch's allegations. You've got these clandestine crash retrieval and reverse engineering programs that are operating without congressional oversight. Is taxpayer dollars being wasted on programs, or why does Congress not know about it when its job, its mission is to enforce accountability and have oversight? So I actually, following Anna Paulina Luna's tweets there, I just put out a quote. This is what I've been really confused about to date. This was on the 13th of January. And this is still, my feeling is no different now than when I posted this. I find it absolutely absurd that the US House Oversight Committee on Oversight and Accountability still has not been afforded the appropriate clearances, even if only by way of a one-time read-in, to hear David Grusch's classified testimony in its entirety as it pertains to the allegations of wastage, fraud, and abuse. So, and if we believe what we're hearing, David Grusch hasn't been has hid his clearances restored so that he can divulge this information in a SCIF. Why it's taking so long for David Grusch to have his clearances restored so he can disclose this information to members of the House Oversight Committee is still a quandary. And I went on to say, they haven't received the appropriate clearances to hear David Grusch's classified testimony in its entirety as it pertains to allegations of wastage, fraud, and abuse, and fulfill its congressional mission of overseeing the spending of taxpayer dollars and exposing and mitigating wastage, fraud, and abuse. How on earth can it, being the House Oversight Committee, exercise oversight when it's not allowed to see any of the classified information? If this isn't evidence of a broken system, I don't know what it is. Because the mission of the House Oversight Committee, this is just from their website, our mission statement is to ensure the efficiency, effectiveness, and accountability of the federal government and all its agencies. We provide a check and balance on the role and power of Washington and a voice to the people it serves. Genuinely good government requires a commitment to expose waste, fraud, and abuse. We ultimately report to hardworking taxpayers to ensure their investment in government is spent effectively, efficiently, and transparently. We identify problems, shine light on the situation, and propose reforms to prevent abuses from being repeated. And I think that is a reasonable question to be asking. House Oversight Committee charged with exposing waste, fraud, and abuse and mitigating waste, fraud, and abuse is still not allowed to hear David Grusch's classified testimony in its entirety. And that is that is complete joke, in my opinion. Again, could just be a logistical thing. Why it's taking this long, who knows? But I think it's completely suspect. Because if you think about it, if it wasn't UAP related, would it take this long for the House Oversight Committee? Would they not be privy to classified information that goes at the heart of allegations of waste, fraud, and abuse if it was a non-UAP related issue? I'm not too sure. It's an interesting question. Scott, welcome, my friend. Rep Luna commented about having direction for field hearings, and Rep Brichette specifically said where the UFO stuff is. It will be very interesting to learn where those field hearings are going to be held. And you make a good point there, Jimmy. Field hearing with who? So which whistleblowers or witnesses will be called to testify at a field hearing? Short order, quick one. I know AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, was at the commission hearing and asked questions, and I'm still wondering why she was there. Has she said anything since on the UAP topic or done any follow-up? I don't think she's made any comments publicly since she asked questions at the House Oversight Committee hearing. So, yeah, it'd be interesting to. I would love to. I would love it if Matt Laszlo could pin her down on Capitol Hill and get some commentary from her if he tracks her down. So that leads us to our next fun exercise. I thought, well, if there was an upcoming UAP congressional hearing, who would you want to attend? So I put this out there as just a fun tweet. Next UAP congressional hearing would certainly be an interesting one if these individuals were called to testify. And you'll know why this is an interesting cross-section of folks if you understand the backstory between these individuals. From left to right, you have Admiral Tom Wilson. Beneath him, you obviously have Eric Davis. In the center top, you have ORSAP Program Director Jim Lakatsky. Underneath him, you have obviously David Grusch. Top right, you have former lead of the UAP task force, Jay Stratton. And beneath him, you have reported Pentagon ATIP, lead of ATIP, Lou Elizondo. So again, if you understand the backstory and context between these individuals, you know why then it would be an incredibly interesting hearing if these folks were called to testify. So, and Jimmy makes an interesting comment there. Get Elizondo, Mellon, Lakatsky, Nolan, Pasolka in a hearing. And this is not an exhaustive list too. This is just folks that stood out for me. I mean, it would be great to get some, to have some new whistleblowers or witnesses come forward that have direct first-hand knowledge of these alleged programs. Unfortunately, we don't know who they are, so I'm not in a position to post their photos. But it would certainly be an interesting hearing if folks like that were called on to testify. And I certainly agree that Colm Kelleher would be an interesting individual as well. So just a fun thought exercise. As to who would you like to see at an upcoming congressional hearing? It makes the mind wonder, that's for sure. I'm really cognizant of all of your time today, folks. So I do want to move on to a couple of the last few things. There is a really good article that came out from Australian publication Defence Connect in January. I put out a tweet there. It's hard to read, so I'll read it. Northrop Grumman, who we've heard time and time again there have been allegations that Northrop Grumman is associated with a clandestine crash retrieval and or reverse engineering program of UAP. Northrop Grumman to develop deep space radar capability to boost AUKUS, that's the Australian, UK, US Trilateral Alliance Partnership. The new program is designed to provide 24/7 all-weather capabilities that will increase the ability to detect, track, identify, and characterize objects in deep space, with the memorandum of understanding between the three countries set to last 22 years. That's a pretty decent agreement. I wonder if objects will include UAP. And I've linked the article in the description in the show notes below. So if you want to have a look at it, do check it out. See if I can pull it up for you quickly on screen. Here we go. So again, I'm not going to read through this article, but if there's this deep space radar that's being developed for AUKUS, and it's going to be, let me see here. I'll read just a couple of things from it. The first couple of paragraphs, really. So Deep Space Advanced Radar Capability, DARC, D-A-R-C, is a global network of 3 advanced ground space sensors to be operated in collaboration with AUKUS Alliance partners, the United States, Australia, and the United Kingdom. Leaders from the 3 countries recently signed a memorandum of understanding to host and operate a DARC as a collaboration to expand beyond what individual nations could achieve alone in one of the most critical domains for future security. The new program is designed to provide 24/7 all-weather capabilities that will increase the ability to detect, track, identify, and characterize objects in space, with the memorandum of understanding between the 3 countries set to last 22 years, as I mentioned. U.S. Assistant Secretary of Defense for Space Policy, Dr. John Plum, said in December 23, the Deep Space Advanced Radar capability will leverage the geography of the United States, Australia, and the United Kingdom to further enhance our collective space domain awareness, the ability to track, identify, and characterize space objects. Space domain awareness is foundational to responsible space operations and is essential for responding to activity in space, whether that activity is routine or hostile. DARC offers higher sensitivity, better accuracy, increased capacity, and a more agile tracking than current radars capable of tracking objects in geosynchronous Earth orbit. I'll see if there's another comment, and that was the article. So very interesting. Will the capabilities of this DARC be able to detect UAP? And if so, what data will be shared across those AUKUS partners, the United States, Australia, and the UK? So I've gone after that memorandum of understanding for between those 3 countries, Australia, the UK, and the US, for that DARC program. I've FOIA'd the memorandum of understanding. It would be interesting to see what additional detail is kind of available in that document. So as soon as I have secured release of that MOU, that memorandum of understanding, I'll certainly share it on all social channels, or primarily X, as well as probably do a bit of a debrief of it on this channel. A few just little fun things at the back end here, folks. If I just pull up my deck once again, I know there are a couple comments, questions come through, so I do want to call those out before we wrap up the session. So on the 15th of January, I posted, this was an interesting one. The Royal Australian Air Force, RAF, is preparing for the world's toughest air combat training environment alongside counterparts from the US and the UK at Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada. Seeing as Area 51 is only around 250 kilometers from Nellis Air Force Base, this is probably about as close as the RAF has got to the UAP topic in the last 25 years. And that would be, I would say, a true statement, because the Royal Australian Air Force has done sweet jack all on the UAP topic since 1996. And if the rumors are true that Area 51, a la the Bob Lazar claims of a clandestine, secret reverse engineering program at S4, south of kind of Groom Lake, Area 51, that same sort of geography. This is the closest that the Royal Australian Air Force has gotten to the UAP topic. And the Defence Australia posted on their social on the 17th of January just a couple of images pertaining to this. Obviously got the F-35. Australia has, the Royal Australian Air Force has a fleet of F-35s in its arsenal. So those who are obviously, flown over or taken over for these training exercises. Their post was one of the toughest air combat training events. Exercise Red Flag Nellis has begun. F-35A Lightning II aircraft and 150 Australian Air Force aviators joined counterparts from the US Air Force and Royal Air Force, I imagine that's the UK, at Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada to hone their warfighting skills. So close to Area 51, guys. So close. So something else that I found was interesting on the 20th of January, our good pal, Ronald Moultrie, who we know was alongside Scott Bray in May of 2022 at the first congressional hearing on UAP. A bit of an abysmal effort by Scott Bray and Ronald Moultrie to answer questions from congressmen and women on what US DOD has been doing on UAP. Now, what do we know about Ronald Moultrie? He is the former boss of former AARO director, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick. And I think some real questions need to be asked of Ronald Moultrie because he's been stonewalling. He was stonewalling AARO's efforts for as long as we can remember. I mean, back in April of last year, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick testified before Congress, Kirsten Gillibrand's subcommittee, that AARO's strategic plan had not yet been signed off on. The website had not been developed, and that was waiting for sign off by Ronald Moultrie. He's the purse strings holder. Why did it take Ronald Moultrie so bloody long to sign off on some of the initiatives that Kirkpatrick wanted to get underway with AARO? And so Ronald Moultrie actually met with the Australian Department of Defence Secretary, not what is comparable as the Secretary of Defence. That's the Minister for Defence in Australia, but the Secretary, one that kind of leads up all the secretarial functions of the Defence, Australian Department of Defence. So Ronald Moultrie met with the Secretary of the Australian Department of Defence, Greg Moriarty, to discuss peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific region, unparalleled progress in the AUKUS partnership, risk to global security, and the upcoming NATO summit. Any discussions on UAP? Highly unlikely. I doubt it, because it sounds like Ronald Moultrie is really not interested in doing anything to be transparent on the UAP, and his lackluster efforts to get AARO off its ass is testament to that. Let's just wrap things up with a few more things. I want to talk about the project, on Channel 10 in Australia. Now, these guys are the bane of my existence in the sense that they always are ridiculing and just plaguing the topic with stigma. They'll cover what's happening in the US, but they'll do it with from a complete farcical effort, and they won't cover it with any sincerity. That they cover other important topics, in an Australian context when we're talking about, whether it be politics, issues that Australian taxpayers have, and so on. They'll just treat the UAP topic with complete ridicule and disdain almost. So let me show you. I won't play this whole thing. I just want to play a little bit from this segment on the project, so you can have a look for yourself.
UFO bulletin.
Movies, grainy clips,
And conspiracy theory peddlers like Fox News reject Tucker Carlson have whipped the world into a UFO spotting frenzy in recent years.
Yes, these things are real.
Approaching projected Earth orbit.
Do you believe in UFOs visiting Earth?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I do.
UFOs, they could exist. Have you ever seen one?
Yes.
UFOs could exist, but the aliens are not too sure about that.
Well, sorry, dudes. And now might be time to admit that visiting extraterrestrial craft are indeed a thing of science fiction. All because of this guy.
I'm a long-term intelligence officer, scientist, and military officer.
Sean Kirkpatrick is the former director of AARO, or the USA's All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. Basically, a department charged with bringing some science and clear thinking to the often sensationalized world of UAPs, or Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena, UFOs.
Oh my God, what was that?
Let's go closer. Old mate Kirkpatrick has just written an article for Scientific American, and he dropped this bombshell.
A forthcoming investigational report from an office of the Pentagon has found no evidence of aliens.
Oh my God! Weird, huh? He also slammed a select number of pro-UFO pushers for essentially colluding and wasting everyone's time.
We know that UFOs exist.
They're sophisticatedly engineered. I think it was not from this world.
He's presumably talking about people like guys who testified in Congress that the US has been hiding and attempting to reverse engineer UFOs.
Do you believe that our government is in possession of UAPs?
Absolutely. I know the exact locations.
Kirkpatrick also said that absolutely no records of a hidden UFO program exist, that an echo chamber of the same drongos pushed such outlandish claims, and that
none of the conspiracy-minded whistleblowers had come to AARO to provide their evidence for the record, despite numerous invitations.
So guys, is this the end of our galactic quest? Has Shawnee Boy killed all the fun? Is the truth really not out there?
I feel like they're everywhere lately.
There's something there.
I saw one of these beings, right? I saw one of them. One of them entered my room when I was a little kid.
Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick just thought it was BS from the beginning.
He tries to make it look like people who believe in this conspiracy are basically crackpots. He's the crackpot.
Yeah, you are.
He's a crackpot.
I hope it's not the end of this story, because we have followed no story closer than this.
Than UFOs. We pushed them hard.
Yeah, we really have.
What are dream killers? A lot of them.
Well, would you like to see the dreams that
Yes,
kill?
please.
Okay,
Oh, yeah,
so
yeah.
here is a video that they have since said was debunked. This was cited as these UFOs. They have said they've done the inspection. They are 3 separate commercial aircraft flying at a great distance from the infrared sensor, and they look like dots.
Together, though.
That's the weird thing.
Perfectly spaced out.
That's very strange. Now, here's one they haven't resolved, so that you can make spooky noises if you want. What's that? Probably a commercial aircraft, but we don't know.
Wow, it's moving very quick, though.
It is.
And here's one, I put one as well. This one is unresolved as well. We're not sure about this one. We've got,
what is it?
Yeah, so we don't know whether that's real or not real.
It's a very good shot.
Steve, do you believe?
I'm a Tucker Carlson man, yes.
So there you go. I mean, well, for starters, it wasn't a commercial aircraft, the Go Fast. It's still unresolved, and NASA wasn't even able to. I'm of the opinion that NASA didn't look at all of the data for Go Fast. They ignored the wind speed. And in the chat, Scott, I know he and his colleagues have done some great work on trying to get to the bottom of Go Fast, but you can kind of see just the taking the piss out of the topic. Like, you guys, the project, you have some folks that are in positions of leadership and authority in the Australian government. Why aren't you asking questions of them as to, well, what is Australia doing about this topic when the US is taking it seriously? And why did the Australian Department of Defence say that it didn't attend the Five Eyes Forum on UAP back in July last year, when then in December it said it did? Like, get off your ass and do your homework. Stop treating the topic, belittling the topic, and treating it with derision and ridicule. It just really shits me to tears. And I would concur with you, Jimmy, there. A big FU to the to the project on that one. Some of the comments have come through. Let me get rid of my fair use banner there. So, exactly. Great point, Jimmy. Why not get Ross Coulthart on and debate it, or at least call out some of the important information that the project is completely failing to recognize and call attention to. Scott, great point. I do want to point out that Kirkpatrick was provided with the gimbal paper So a briefing paper on the gimbal incident, and the public comments indicate some shit effery was going on. Further quote, I asked him about gimbal in person. While his exact comments are off the record, not even Mick West would agree with what he said. It was beyond absurd. So yeah, gimbal and go fast, they're still two incidents that are completely shrouded in mystery. I mean, we do not have a definitive conclusion as to what they are. And I think that should be investigated, even if they are prosaic. Well, there's a good reason to try and get to the bottom of what those are, and if they are truly anomalous, which they seem to be. If you speak to the pilots, if you hear from the pilots that are associated with the gimbal incident, I mean, unfortunately, Mick West doesn't take into account all of the pilot testimony for the gimbal incident. Oh, look at the ASA. There's a whole fleet of them. What about factoring that into your analysis and to your assessment? Mark, the project wouldn't do that because it doesn't suit their narrative. I agree 100%. Scott, link for me to chat about NASA. Yes, let's get started about NASA's comments on the Go Fast incident. Shorter to cook one. The project, I'm bogging my head, I'm bagging my head on the desk. Yes, I've done that many times myself. Yes, thank Christ Rove isn't hosting anymore. And yes, he is long gone. Thank God indeed. So yeah, they're just wanted to show you that for context that, unfortunately there are still facets within the Australian news media that are just treating this topic with complete derision, belittling it, and just taking the piss. They're just not taking it seriously. I'm hopeful that there will be more outlets like the Canberra Times that will be reporting on the UAP topic in Australian context this year and calling out the Australian Department of Defence's, complete, lack of transparency and providing factual information to sitting senators and taxpayers on their involvement to date on UAP discussions with the United States. So that will be, hopefully we'll see some more reporting on that over time. I want to wrap things up now, folks. So obviously I called out the project specifically following that segment they did. I said, rather than belittling the topic, maybe you should ask the Australian Department of Defence why it lied to a sitting Australian senator back in July 2023, as I just kind of mentioned there. So, they should get off their ass and be asking these questions, and not just some private citizen who has a small number of, following along the conversations that I'm having. What else happened recently as we kind of come to the back end? On the 23rd of January, KRAD, who remembers the crud money from back in the day, the $700 we got, I still do. Thank you, Kevin Rudd, for that, by the way. Back on the 23rd of January, current Australian ambassador to the United States in Washington, D.C. is former PM Kevin Rudd. He tweeted out there, terrific to be back in Washington, a big year ahead for us all, for Australia in the United States. Lots to do. We'll be focused on information technology and biotech, on renewable energy, on defense and AUKUS, and on sharing our arts, movies, and entertainment. Wishing all a productive and happy 2024. Hey, K-Rudd, does all of those things you mentioned, does this include being more transparent and truthful to taxpayers on Australia's engagement with the United States on the issue of UAP? Because the Australian Department of Defence failed the grade miserably in 2023, and then obviously called out that tweet that I posted back in December. So I wonder if Kevin Rudd knows more than we do on the UAP topic, being a former Prime Minister. If it ever crossed his desk, or if he had ever had any classified conversations about it, it would be very interesting. What's happened most recently? The Inspector General of the Department of Defense in the US came out with its report, unclassified summary of evaluation of the DoD's actions regarding unidentified anomalous phenomena. This report was dated the 15th of August, 2023. So this is linked in the description below. If you actually want to have a look at this report, just have a look at the applicable link. I think it is, where is it? This is it. This is on their the Inspector General's website. So basically, this report outlines things about 16 pages long. Actually, what I wanted to call out briefly is, let's just pull up the press release. So this is what the Department of Defense Office Inspector General put out on the 25th of January, press release regarding this report. Really, what I want to call attention to is, where is it? The second last paragraph. This one here. So the DoD Office of Inspector General also found that the DoD's lack of a comprehensive, coordinated approach to address UAP may pose a threat to military forces and national security. For instance, the DoD Office Inspector General determined that the DoD has no overarching UAP policy, and as a result, it lacks assurance that national security and flight safety threats to the United States from UAP have been identified and mitigated. So why is that important? Well, we'll talk about that in just a moment. So let me pull up the actual report, and again, you can access the report if you want via the link that's in the description below. Let me just pull up for you. I'll just type in a search. So this is what's important. The DoD does not have a comprehensive, coordinated approach to address UAP. That's a big concern. So there's obviously a lot more work to be done by the United States Department of Defense to address these gaps and holes around UAP reporting. We reviewed the DoD's policies, procedures, and actions for detecting, reporting, collecting, analyzing, identifying UAP, and determined that, among other things, the DoD has not used a coordinated approach to detect, report, collect, analyze, and identify UAP. DoD's components have largely excluded geographic combatant commands, which are responsible for detecting, deterring, and preventing threats and attacks against the United States and its territories, possessions and bases in their respective areas of responsibility in developing UAP policies and procedures. And DoD components develop varying processes to collect, analyze, and identify UAP incidents. As a result, the DoD may not have developed a comprehensive and coordinated strategy for understanding, identifying, and protecting against unidentified phenomena that may present a safety threat to military personnel and territory. And it goes on in this report. DoD's lack of a comprehensive, coordinated approach to address UAP may pose that threat to military forces and UAP and U.S. national security. And so, as a result, it makes a number of recommendations to mitigate these gaps. To plug the holes of these gaps, to bolster policy around UAP collection, investigation, reporting, and so on. So do have a look at this document. It is an interesting one. It's in complete contrast with what you heard come out of Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, saying that it's all a ruse. All these spooky hustlers just telling the Department of telling stories of NHI and crash retrieval and reverse engineering. Well, there's a few problems. I mean, this kind of is a blaring report saying that, well, AARO, you haven't really done your job if you've got if there's all these gaps within policy for UAP across all of these various Defense Force services. So the issue there is, and this is a good callback to something we talked about earlier. Let me pull up. And this is one of the last few things I'll show is I think it's this article from the Liberation Times on the 29th of January. So basically reporting on those recommendations. And who do we happen to see in this report? Our good friend, Ronald Moultrie. So Liberation Times contacted the Joint Chiefs of Staff asking whether Americans could sleep comfortably following the conclusion of the alarming report. No response has been received. The report also highlighted a lack of response by the United States Air Force to its recommendations, noting that its response did not provide the specific actions that the Air Force would take and the dates for these actions. Air Force has always been a very big question mark as to why they've been so silent on the UAP topic. And it continues to be as a result of this report from the DoD OIG. However, a DoD OIG spokesperson told Liberation Times that this has now been resolved. We can confirm that the Air Force provided us with actions and a timeline. Finally, something from the Air Force. The Joint Chiefs of Staff is the only component within the evaluation report publicly released on 20th of January to have implemented its recommendation. The DoD leaders that have not implemented recommendations are Ronald Moultrie, the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security in coordination with the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, AARO. So the complete lack of action from Ronald Moultrie with respect to AARO getting off its ass and doing its job continues. That's why I think Ronald Moultrie needs to be hauled before Congress. If Tim Burchett is serious about getting some folks in the Pentagon in front of Congress and answering some hard questions, Ronald Moultrie needs to be one of those guys. Why have you been stonewalling the progress and success of AARO, and really you've put the handcuffs on AARO and prohibited them from doing their job by failing to sign off on all of their initiatives, their strategic plan, and you haven't yet implemented the recommendations that were made back in August of last year. So again, more supporting evidence that Ronald Moultrie is one that needs to be asked some serious questions of. And I'm not the one just saying that as well. It's not just me who is, calling out Ronald Moultrie. It's also our good friend, and actually so before I come to that, let me just highlight this tweet. I made reference of this in a tweet to Richard Marles. I said, the great divide between Australia and the United States on UAP continues to widen. Richard Marles, this new report by the US DoD Inspector General highlights just how further behind the 8 ball Australia really is when it comes to the issue of UAP. And then I linked the report. While the US is making recommendations to, quote, integrate roles, responsibilities, requirements, and coordinate procedures regarding UAP into existing intelligence, counterintelligence, and force protection policies and procedures, Australia is yet to even acknowledge that UAP represents a threat to the national security safety of flight, and that a compelling reason exists to devote resources to the investigation of UAP. If the US hasn't yet got it right when it comes to implementing policies and procedures to help better understand and mitigate the risks that UAP pose, what are the chances that Australia's existing, quote, safety and security reporting and management frameworks, and that's taken directly from the Minister of Defence's response to my UAP petition, what are the chances that Australia's existing reporting and management frameworks are anywhere near remotely, quote, sufficiently flexible to capture UAP? They're absolutely not. So if the US can't get it right, and Australia hasn't even acknowledged that a conversation needs to be had on the UAP topic, it just shows you how much further away from the 8 ball, behind the 8 ball we are when it comes to taking this topic seriously. And Ross Coulthart is also of the opinion that Ronald Moultrie really needs to be hauled before Congress to answer some questions. His quote of the Liberation Times article: "Let's feign surprise that Ronald Moultrie, Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security with AARO, has since August 2023 only implemented one of 11 national security UAP recommendations by DoD's Inspector General." Again, it's glaring right in front of you that Ronald Moultrie is sitting on his fat ass and not doing anything to help AARO achieve its mission, and do what it was mandated to do. I mean, part of me feels sorry for Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick in the sense that if he wanted to get all these initiatives and a strategic plan and maybe a communication strategy off the ground, and this is just speculation on my part, he had all that ready to go, and Ron Moultrie is not signing off on it, then how is Kirkpatrick expected to do his job? Now, I suspect I've always been of the assessment that Kirkpatrick never wanted the job. And if you actually listen to the podcast that he did with Peter Bergen on In the Room, he was kind of ordered to take the job, head up AARO. He said, they asked him, "Do you want the job?" He said, "Let me check with my family and get back to you." And before he even got a chance to get back to them, he said, "Well, we've already told Congress that you're the man for the job." And in every interview that Kirkpatrick has done, and every time he's spoken publicly, he's always come across like he doesn't want to be there. It's the last thing that he wants to talk about is UAP. So, I'm of the assessment that he never wanted the job in the first place, and which, for me, I perceive that to be that he's never taken the job seriously. Could be wrong, but that's just my assessment. Just a couple of the comments that have come through. Jimmy raised a good point. We still haven't seen anything about the shoot downs. Just completely silent. Yeah, where the hell is the photographic evidence and the visual imagery from the 3 unidentified aerial objects that were shot down in February of last year? Pentagon was quick to release footage from the U2, the Dragon Lady of the Chinese spy balloon, and they'll quickly release MQ-9 Reaper drone footage of the Russian jets dousing the drone with fuel. But the White House and the Pentagon is yet to release anything for the US public on those 3 unidentified aerial objects. And if they were just balloons, if they're just prosaic, why not release it? Because you're embarrassed. Because you're embarrassed that you had to shoot down balloons. That's exactly why I think you're not releasing anything. US Air Force, Mark says, US Air Force is the big problem. I think they're the blockers. Yep, they've certainly been silent on the UAP topic, ever since the close of Blue Book, really, haven't they? Mike Turner also needs to be interrogated, as well as to his paybacks and involvement to cover up. Yeah, there's certainly some questions about his possible conflicts of interest representing Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio, district he represents. Short order Cook Grant. Don Curlin, owner of the biggest private air force, Air US, is training the US pilots in mock outcomes, and the training intersects with the training for UAP UFO interaction. Interesting. Be interested to learn a bit more on that. If you've got any links, feel free to drop them in the live chat or the comments of the of this video if you wish. Short or Cook one. Yep, Kirkpatrick was ordered to take the job at AARO. Never wanted it. Never wanted it in the first place. Wasn't worried at his old job either. Yep. And what's interesting is that, to his credit, Stephen Greenstreet reported that Skinwalker Ranch owner Brandon Fugel conducted a presentation in a classified meeting on Skinwalker Ranch, and who was reportedly at that meeting. This is well before his AARO days, was Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick. And Stephen Greenstreet reported initially that his source had told him that Kirkpatrick said to Brandon Fugel, it was Kirkpatrick that said to Brandon Fugel at the front of the meeting, "You don't need to bore us with the realities of the UFO phenomenon, Brandon Fugel. We know the realities of the new UFO phenomenon." I'm paraphrasing, something to that effect. So if it's true that Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick was engaged on the UFO topic prior to his commencement as the director of AARO, well, what was his level of engagement on the topic prior to taking the head seat in AARO? That's an interesting. If it was true that he was at that meeting, that Brandon Fugel. Because Brandon Fugel never admitted in that video that Stephen Greenstreet did, the last video on Skinwalker Ranch, I think, called Judgment Day. It was never Brandon Fugel that said it was Sean Kirkpatrick in that meeting that said that. It was Stephen Greenstreet who reported that. All right, so as we kind of wrap up shop, folks, I just want to highlight a couple of recent events. One that really stood out for me is great bloke Dan Warren. If you haven't followed his work on Twitter, on X, he's on TikTok. He's a huge following on TikTok. He's also got a YouTube channel. There is a link in the description below to a recent sit-down interview he had with Representative Ogles, who was one of the congressmen at the House Oversight Committee hearing in July of last year, where he asked Ryan Graves, Dave Grusch, and David Fravor about UAP and the national security threats that they pose. This is by far, and I give full kudos and credit to Dan Warren on this is by far one of the most interesting and enlightening long form interviews with any member of Congress that I've seen to date on the UAP UFO topic. Some really intelligent, probing questions from Dan and some thought-provoking responses from Representative Ogles. So not bad for a super fan, Dan. And if you watch my Stephen Greenstreet project that I'll be working on and hopefully completing soon, you will understand the context of that super fan comment. So do watch that interview. It goes for about, I can't remember, it's 30 plus minutes or something. But what stood out for me, again, for everything that I'm advocating for on the UAP topic in an Australian context, was this question and answer from Representative Ogles. Question from Dan and answer from Representative Ogles. And thank you, Dan, for allowing me to share this clip.
I've always had is there's just a handful of members of Congress that are hyper interested in this topic. What's it going to take for the more members of Congress, the rest of Congress, to realize this is a significant national security issue that does need to be addressed and figured out what's going on?
Yeah, I think there's because of the hearings, and we had that open hearing where Grusch was at, and it was like a rock concert. People were lined up, like literally. I had gotten to work early that morning, and I walked to work, and so before the doors even opened, people were lined up outside the building.
Guilty.
And then were lined up inside the building, waiting for somebody to get up to go to the bathroom so that they could come in. And so there's this. Our job is to represent our constituents, and so if your constituents have an area of interest, whether it's a national or international issue, or maybe it's a hyper localized issue, part of your job is to also take note, right? And so I think what you're seeing is members of Congress are like, oh wow, there's something there. But fortunately or unfortunately, there's really only so much room on the committee. And so I think you'll see the same faces and the same people in committee because there's only so much room. I think now there's probably other people that would love to be on it or part of it, but I think there's more interest than what you may perceive or that there ever has been, quite frankly. And I think too it's been legitimized in a way that just a few years ago members of Congress would have shied away from it. But like you said, you mentioned Harry Reid, you mentioned Marco Rubio. You now have senators in particular or members of Congress that are talking about it, and it's like, oh wow, we should probably be asking those questions.
So what really stood out for me there from Representative Ogles' comments is that he takes seriously what's important to his constituents. And I've been saying this time and time again in an Australian context. Members of Parliament, senators, Senator Whish-Wilson being the example, the Greens senator for Tasmania, those that are in positions, elected positions of leadership, they take seriously what is important to their constituents. So, if you reach out to your member of parliament or your senator and you let them know that the UAP topic is something that you take seriously and you want the Australian government to take it seriously as well, then that's what you should be conveying to your elected representative. And that's from what Ogles was saying just then, I think that's incredibly true, that members of Congress in the United States are listening to what their constituents are telling them, what's important to them. And now you have a growing, a chorus of congressmen and women in the United States that are pressing for answers on this UAP topic. Is it real? Is it, as Kirkpatrick has opined in his op-ed, is it all BS being pushed by a small group of conspiracists? Constituents reach out to their congressmen and women, let them know they want the topic to be taken seriously, and those congressmen and women take it seriously. So that's what we should be doing as Australians. If we take this topic seriously, get in touch with your MP or a senator. Tell them that you want to take it seriously as well. And yes, I noticed Chris Lito was very excited to be there while his footage was included in that short package there. And I was also surprised at how much Ogles doesn't seem to be aware of, which just shows you that's why I think it's great that Dan Warren was able to secure that sit-down interview with Representative Ogles, because I'm sure that it was an enlightening experience for Representative Ogles. There were things that Dan shared with him or asked him on that he wasn't aware of, and Dan made him aware of things that, maybe now Representative Ogles staffers will start to look into a little bit more. So you can't, congressmen and women and their staffers have so many issues that their constituents want them to take seriously, that they probably don't have the time, energy, and effort to investigate and ask these sorts of thought-provoking questions that we're asking. So I give Dan a hell of a lot of credit for asking some really intelligent and probing questions, which highlighted, things that Representative Ogles doesn't know and hopefully will now learn about, as well as how we can engage our elected representatives on this topic, and get them to engage in conversation. So I take my hat off to Dan for doing that great interview. Last thing I just want to share with you. I know I've come kind of up on our time here, so let me. If you're interested, this is really only if you're interested. I had the good fortune of being invited to speak with Tom Wheeler and Dave Foley late last year. The interview is now on the podcast, really, with Tom and Dave. So I've linked it in the description below. If you're interested to listen to that conversation, feel free. I also was recently having some really interesting conversations with Martin Willis on podcast UFO. That's also linked in the description below. In both that interview with Tom Wheeler and Dave Foley from Really, and with Martin Willis on podcast UFO, I talked quite extensively on the Westall case. So if you haven't yet had a look at the documentary that I did on the Westall witnesses, you're meeting a small number of primary witnesses from the Westall incident of the 6th of April 1966, their witness reunion event back in April of last year. Feel free to give it a look. It's on my channel. I haven't linked it in the description below, but if you just jump over to my channel and you'll find the Westall witnesses there. Close to home, I was also on a recent podcast, Encounters Down Under. We talked about Westall and what's been happening in an Australian context and abroad as well. So if that's of interest, feel free to have a look at it outside of today's conversation. But that's everything I wanted to cover off on you folks. God, we've gone almost 3 hours. It's probably the longest live stream I've done. Thank you to all of you that have stayed with me. I really appreciate you taking all of the time out of your day, your morning, your day, your evening, your graveyard shift, wherever you are, because I know there are some folks abroad that like to tune in for these live streams. So thank you all for your time. Thank you, Scott, for taking time out of your day to join me. I really appreciate it. Jimmy, Jasmine, Short Order Cook One, Mark, Kyle, all of you that have joined today, thank you so much for continuing to support the channel. I do really appreciate it. So thank you for all your kind comments and Jasmine, you didn't have to do that. That's greatly appreciated, my friend. I really appreciate all your support. Thank you for your kind donation, and thank you for your ongoing patronage via Patreon. For those of you that are interested to follow my journey on this topic, consider going above and beyond the old like, share, subscribe. You can support the channel for a couple of dollars a month on Patreon or YouTube. Patreon, there's a private chat. I know Jimmy and I and Jasmine have had some conversations back and forth. I try and share with those Patreons information that I'm able to secure for release through FOIA first, so that they get a first look at it. Just one of the perks of being a Patreon. So thank you, Jasmine, so greatly for your contribution and your ongoing support. I really, truly appreciate it. Thank you, Jackie, for your kind words as well. And thank you, Jimmy, as always. So thanks all for your time. Enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy your weekend, wherever you are. And I will leave you with this as we wrap things up. So thanks again for your time, folks.
If you have enjoyed this episode of the Unexplained Rundown, please consider giving it a thumbs up, sharing with your friends, family, colleagues, and social network, as well as subscribing to the channel. And if you'd like to be notified whenever the Unexplained Rundown goes live, premieres, or posts a new video, be sure to ring that cowbell.